We are live with another episode of the MMA Vivisection, running just a few minutes late as always. It would not be the MMA Vivisection if we were not slightly late. I am joined this week by Connor Rebish. We are talking about UFC 206 and UFC Fight Night Albany. I'm trying to say this right because people have been giving me shit all week about it. Because my natural reaction as a Northwesterner is to say Albany. It's Albany, you know? But
yeah, I mean, Albany feels right to me, but you never know. Sometimes the instinct is off. Like the guy from Food Network, it's not Alton Brown, it's Alton Brown.
Yeah, whatever.
Sometimes you're wrong, no matter which one feels right.
So it's Albany. And we are actually going to be talking about, even though UFC 206 is this Saturday and the Albany card is this Friday, we are going to talk about UFC 206 first because it is not a trash fire.
It is by far the superior card, no question.
I will actually say I like this Albany card. They have filled it with really good prospects, but it is a bunch of people that nobody fucking knows. And if you tried to like bring your bros over to watch a UFC card, this would not be the card to get them.
Yeah, and I can't even confidently say that I can't say what we usually say, which is, well, you may not know, but they're going to be fun. Some of these fights might not be very fun, but it's just that a lot of them, if you really care about MMA, feature fighters that you might want to have your eye on.
There could be some future title contenders on that card.
Definitely, but not all of them should even be fun enough to really warrant. If you're going to watch one card this weekend, I know which one I will be watching.
Yeah. So we're going to get right into this UFC 206 card. Try not to waste a lot of time because, we have two of these things to get through, and we waste a lot of time. That is our modus operandi. So,
modus operandi, I think you mean, Zane.
Whatever.
You Northwesterners and your crazy pronunciation.
This has already gone to shit, so I'm already done with you. I don't know if I did this last time I had a show with you. I think I did, but I'm starting now. Somebody suggested it, and I like the idea so much that I've immediately started doing it, of reading the line movement on odds rather than the spread of odds.
Yeah, so you have an idea of what direction the lines are headed in.
Yeah.
Yep, I like that.
So that's what we're going to continue doing this time around. First fight up, Dustin Ortiz, Zach Makovsky, flyweight opener for this UFC 206 card.
I will take it away. I really like this fight. I think this is last weekend we had our big flyweight extravaganza, two great flyweight fights, and that was basically the best the division has to offer. Now we get the middle of the pack of the division, but still I think a testament to how strong flyweight actually is. It is deceivingly strong because you see all these guys with mixed records in UFC, and you're like, the division kind of sucks. And then you have a really dominant champion at the top, which makes everything seem less impressive. The reality is that you have a lot of really good fighters. Not a lot, actually, but the majority of the UFC roster are really very good.
The top 20 flyweights are pretty quality. The bottom 9 or so are like, I don't know, who's this dude? But
right, but that's better than a lot of other divisions in terms of percentages. And there are a lot of great flyweights out there to pick up. It's just that the roster's so small that everyone ends up fighting each other over and over again. And so if you look at Zach Makovsky and Dustin Ortiz, the last 3 losses for these guys are to men like Jussier Formiga, Joseph Benavidez, Wilson Hayes. These are the best fighters in the division that they're losing to, and it's no shame to have a 2-3 record when that is your level of competition. Yeah. Going in here, I think I like Zach Makovsky a little better. I think he's more cerebral and technical. He can do a better job of maintaining or managing distance, where I think Dustin Ortiz has kind of proven himself to be a little too wild for his own good at times, really just kind of this ball of kinetic energy that just goes rushing after his opponent, throws a lot, shoots a lot of takedowns, but he's more hittable, a little less careful than Makovsky, and Makovsky actually is the more successful wrestler of the two per fight metric. He actually shoots for more takedowns and lands more takedowns every fight.
His takedowns are much prettier, too.
Yeah. His timing, his setups are really, really nice. Ortiz is a great scrambler, but I think he will need to find an opening in a scramble to take over at any point in this fight. And even then, it's going to be hard to hold Zach Makovsky down. So I like Makovsky by decision.
Yeah, what I really like about this fight is that it's proving it's really a proving ground for one of these guys at flyweight to see which one of them is really like a stalwart top 10 fighter.
It's a sorting fight.
Yeah, it's a sorting fight because both guys have beat guys that they were supposed to beat, and both guys have lost to guys that they were probably going to lose to. And now it's just a question of, well, like you're both in this really similar place, this really similar style. Which of you is actually cut above? And for Zach Makovsky, it's really you are the more technical fighter here, pretty much everywhere. Can you actually use that to take over a fight with somebody who is not way less skilled than you? So now in retrospect too, his win over Tim Elliott looks better and better. So
yeah,
Makovsky has shown, he's at least shown that he has the ability to do that. And yeah, I trust him to beat Ortiz. He gives Makovsky exactly the kind of striking battle that Makovsky wants, which is somebody rushing in at him wild.
Yeah.
And then on the ground, Makovsky doesn't have as much control as Formiga does, but he's got a much prettier, more powerful takedown game than Formiga.
Yeah.
So.
The one X factor may be that Makovsky is 33 years old and Ortiz is only 27. I do think Makovsky's the kind of guy who, as long as at least until his body really starts to break down, is smart enough to keep making small adjustments from one fight to the next. But
I also would say that Ortiz hasn't improved in the ways that you would have expected over his career to date.
Yeah, you have the age difference, but both guys seem to be more or less the fighters that they are going to be.
Yep. All right, odds on this fight. Makovsky is the favorite, opening at -215 and moving down to -165. Ortiz is the underdog, opening at +165 and dropping down to +138. I mean, if that line keeps closing, I would put a bet on Makovsky, I guess I would say, because I see him as a pretty reasonable favorite. I mean, it's going to probably be almost certainly a decision, and it's going to be an action-filled decision, which means that you have a high probability of a split decision.
Yeah.
But I expect Makovsky to come out on top.
Is there a total on this fight? Let's see. Over 2.5 rounds, -365. Not worth it.
No. Nothing worth there for timing.
Nope.
And like I said, I wouldn't pick any like inside the distance or anything like that.
No, decision seems very likely.
Yep. That brings us to a bout between Rustam Khabilov and Jason Sago. And this is one of those fights I highlighted about a week or two ago. I did a little poll of like, which of these crushing mismatches do you most expect to be upset? And a lot of people picked this one, but it is still, in my eyes, a crushing mismatch. I like Jason Sago a lot. He has made his way through the UFC by being a much more technical wrestler than his opposition expects. But the thing is that Rustam Khabilov has shown several times now that the way to beat him is not through out wrestling him, unless you're Benson Henderson, I suppose. Like, he's not a dude like Chris Wade is a good wrestler too, and Khabilov was a step ahead of him all fight. It's just not it's not really the way to take him on, I don't think. And I don't see Sago having the athleticism to do it, or the deep. It's just like, you're matching your greatest strength against somebody else's greatest strength. And I think Khabilov's wrestling game is just much more proven, even as good as Sago's is. A lot of the guys that he's been able to out-wrestle and outwork are guys who are really either inconsistent or really underwhelming. So I'm taking Khabilov by decision.
Yeah, I don't think that's unfair. I do think, looking at some of Khabilov's recent fights, he's not really very inspiring in a lot of his wins these days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're all, even the win over Chris Wade, fairly close, closer than you think it might be if Khabilov is like really this top 10, top flight fighter. He came pretty close to losing to Norman Park. The fight was a unanimous decision and a deserved one. But in what was, I think, a pivotal third round, he almost ended up on his back being controlled by Park and had to really, for about a minute, I think, and had to scramble free and do a lot to get that round back. So it very well, with another minute spent on his back, could have gone the other way. Khabilov is not in there just kind of blowing people out of the water.
No.
And I don't know. When I look at Jason Sago, I see a guy, as you said, I think in just all things, he's better than you expect him to be. But the one thing everyone knows he's really good at is top position jiu-jitsu. He's got great control from basically any top position, good ground and pound, obviously very good submissions. If he gets on top of you, I think he may be one of the best fighters in the division as far as top game jiu-jitsu goes. He's up there. Who else at lightweight?
The question is the competition he's faced. Is that indicative of Justin Salas, Josh Shockley, and Leandro Silva, or is that indicative purely of his skill?
Yeah. That's fair. I think it's a bit of both. I think I would be very surprised if he came in and swarmed Khabilov from the top the way he did to Josh Shockley. That would be a shock to me. But I was impressed by his fight with Leandro Silva. Great ground game, as always, surprisingly good wrestling, very tenacious with his takedown attempts, but also significantly better on the feet. Granted, that was a fighter who has trouble throwing volume, but that's kind of Rustam Khabilov as well. A guy who doesn't throw nearly as much as he should and really kind of relies on people fearing his right hand. Can I see Rustam Khabilov just clipping Jason Sago with a kick counter, with a right hand as he throws a kick and putting him out? Absolutely. But I can also see Jason Sago just kind of doing like what Ryan Hall did to Gray Maynard, kind of annoyingly outpointing Khabilov from range, and then having a real ace up his sleeve if it gets into a scramble. I think he's one of the few guys in the division that may really surprise Khabilov with how good he is on the ground. So I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going to say Jason Sago. I know it's a chancy one. I wouldn't put too much stock in it, but I see it.
I think it's a very chancy one because, like I say, I think the one thing, sort of the ace up Khabilov's sleeve, is that if you get into a ground battle with him, he will be able to outwork you. He will be able to be the more technical fighter who can win the scramble. I don't think he's going to avoid Sago on the ground at all.
I think that will end up being a problem for him because I think he's going to be a little too confident. I think he will find that it's more like fighting Ben Henderson on the ground than it is like fighting Chris Wade, that there's more depth there. But, it remains to be seen because, as you said, we haven't seen Sago against this level of competition.
Yeah. No, and to your point, Khabilov I don't think he's a top 10 fighter. I think he's shown that his game is just always going to be this very limited singular thing that's very difficult to defeat, but it's not ever going to get more complicated than it is.
Which is why they need to get their act together, the UFC, and start using Khabilov for what he's clearly meant for, which is a gatekeeper. Somebody who what they're going to bring to the table, but they're really good at it. And it's going to make it hard for anyone but those who really deserve to be in the top 10 to beat him.
Yep. Khabilov is the favorite. He is opened at minus 260 and has dropped to minus 205. Sago, the underdog, opening at plus 180 and dropping down to plus 169. So
if those odds had headed in the other direction, I would say maybe place a small bet on Sago, but under like plus 200, I wouldn't say there's a ton of value there. It's a chancy pick.
Yeah, and I wouldn't pick either guy. I mean, like, I guess what I would say is I might pick Sago. Let's see. Sago by submission you can get that at plus 500. That might be a pick to make because that's honestly the way I see Sago winning.
Maybe, yeah. Khabilov has been submitted just once though. I think he is pretty hard to submit.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that if Sago is going to get the upset win, it's not going to be on point. It's going to be because he catches Khabilov in a transition.
Could be. I think it's more likely either way that this one goes the distance though.
Yeah, it probably is.
And unfortunately, over 2.5 rounds is minus 230. It's not. The odds are nowhere here. Are they very tempting?
No. All right, and that brings us to a lightweight bout: John McDessie versus Lando Venata.
Everyone's looking forward to this, right?
Yeah.
Everyone in the MMA sphere has their eye on Lando Venata now because he had one of the most shockingly impressive UFC debuts we've ever seen, taking on a guy who is definitely a top contender, one of the two best contenders in his division for the title, on a tear, goes in there and almost finishes him. If you hear Tony Ferguson tell it, he slipped, and that's what happened in that fight. If you watch the fight, he got kicked in the head a few times and hit with some really clean shots.
Tony Ferguson does not strike me as the kind of dude who will ever tell you that he has ever been in trouble in a fight.
He was fine. He was fine. And honestly, he may have felt fine because by the end of the fight, he was there. He may have felt more comfortable than most people who are out on that field. He may not
remember getting hit.
That's true. He may really think, what was I falling down for? I don't remember that happening. I didn't see any kick hit me in the head.
Yeah. Never trust a fighter to tell you how hard their fight was.
Yeah, basically. Venata, very impressive, obviously. Weird, creative movement, surprisingly good defense. Fights out of about a dozen different stances to give you all these different looks all the time. To me, he is, I think, a career-long student of Brandon Gibson. That's basically where he's gotten all of his MMA striking knowledge. And I think he's a great testament to what Brandon Gibson will do in the future with young up-and-coming fighters. It's clear he can give them a really great, eclectic kind of game. To me, it's kind of the best of like a Dwayne Ludwig with pretty tactical, intelligent tactics, and then a Mike Winkeljohn with this weird bag of tricks that you can just try to surprise people with. He's got a good mixture of those two schools of thought. I do worry, however, about Venata going the distance. I think there is a lot of reason to believe that what happened in the Ferguson fight, where he very clearly gassed, he had a short camp. It was a short notice fight. He went kind of crazy trying to finish Ferguson in the first round after having such a surprising amount of success. But it may actually be indicative of a larger problem because Venata has only gone the 3-round distance once. Most of his wins are first-round finishes, and that was a split decision. And that does kind of make me feel that Venata might be a guy who has one really great round in him and then really has to fight tooth and nail or really put his stamp on another round in the fight to seal it and may struggle down the distance. And if that is the case, he will have a hard time with John McDessie, who is hard to finish, surprisingly powerful, very crafty, very experienced. The real thing that saves me from maybe going an upset pick with McDessie is that I think he's looking pretty shopworn these days. A long career as a very undersized lightweight, taking a lot of hard shots in recent fights. He's talked about not really wanting to continue fighting that much after the Cerrone loss. So I think Venata has the momentum on his side and probably has enough gusto as the young prospect to come in here and really put on a good performance. But if he gasses after the first round, I won't say I told you so, but I won't be that shocked either.
Yeah, there's an interesting kind of two potential ideas I feel like going on, which is one that Venata slips himself or gasses himself into getting KO'd by McDessie, or that he's just going to be a little too hard a worker and good a fighter to let McDessie take over. Like, I don't trust McDessie to take over fights. That's the thing.
Yeah, McDessie, he has more power than he's given credit for. He's got one of the higher knockout rates in this division, actually. But
well, he had a ton of early knockouts. He actually hasn't had very many since he came to the UFC.
I do think it still does look like he hits pretty hard, but it kind of has to be that perfect shot to get you out of there. And then a lot of his fights end up being kind of close. I'm thinking back to didn't McDessie fight Anthony Njokuani and have a close fight?
Yeah, which he lost.
Right. So stuff like that, where it makes you worry about McDessie. If he can't hit you cleanly that much, or like the Alan Patrick fight, he doesn't look amazing.
Yeah, and that's the thing I would say. I see with Venata is that his movement is so funky, and he's rarely in one place to be hit, that unless McDessie gets that one perfect shot that he gets to land with Vannata leaping in or something like that, I just don't see McDessie being able to take over the momentum of this fight, being able to get close enough to land enough of the shots that he needs to win. Because even in fights that you could argue that he won, even, against Alan Patrick and Yancy Medeiros, getting to actually land shots is just a problem for him.
Yeah. And I think too, he definitely had a scary moment with Tony Ferguson's reach. Tony Ferguson's arms are 5.5 inches longer than Lando Vannata's, but Vannata's arms are 3 inches longer than John McDessie's. As I said, undersized lightweight, that won't be a problem.
And even a pretty one-dimensional, stable, sit in one place power kickboxer in Mehdi Baghdad had quite a lot of success against McDessie.
Yeah.
So I think even if that is flustering McDessie these days, I just don't trust him to beat Vannata.
I love the bull, man, but I think he is headed toward the end of his career.
Seems likely. And that brings us the odds for that fight. McDessie is the underdog, opening at -110 and moving to +150. So he actually opened at least at even and has slowly moved out to being the underdog. And Vannata opening at -130 and moving out to -179. And that doesn't surprise me much. If the odds get longer, I wouldn't bet on McDessie, honestly. Even if he became a much larger underdog. He's just not consistent enough.
I think he can definitely make Vannata work, but
he can win. I think he can win this fight, but I just wouldn't say like, I am sure John McDessie is going to win this fight,
Yeah. What is, let's see, under 2.5 rounds is +110. That's maybe a choice if you think Vannata is going to knock McDessie out.
Yeah. If you think that because Vannata is a good early finisher. I mean, he's shown it even in the Ferguson fight.
So both guys decent finishers. Vannata especially good early in the fight. You might cover all your bases and bet on it to end, but I could also see McDessie just kind of being hard to hit and having too many answers to get put away easily. So he's a careful fighter.
He is. That brings us to bantamweight and the Fox Sports 1 card. Rest of the cards on Fox Sports 1. These are the prelims, but it doesn't really matter. Mitch Gagnon versus Matthew Lopez. And this is one of those fights that I have no real fucking clue what's going to happen.
How many opportunities have we had on this show, Zane, to question the way the UFC matches their prospects, particularly ones that they got on a show that is meant to develop talent?
Yeah, in fact, between just on this card, you have, even Lando Vannata versus John McDessie. Vannata has had 9 fights. His first UFC fight against Tony Ferguson.
And now he's fighting one of the most experienced journeymen in the division.
Yeah. And then you have Matthew Lopez against Mitch Gagnon. You have Vivian Pereira versus Valerie Letourneau. You have Emil Weber-Meek versus Jordan Mean.
Yeah.
It's even Ho Choi, who I love, against Cub Swanson. It's just they're
still pretty fast. Yeah, they get in the mix, man. And you have Matt Lopez loses to Hani Yahya in a pretty surprising upset. We're like, okay, we need to reevaluate this guy. I know, give him to the guy who everyone agrees is the dark horse.
I didn't pick Matthew Lopez in that fight, so I get to be happy.
I think I picked Yahya by submission as well.
No, I think you picked Lopez in that.
Damn you, Zane! Don't give the lie to my words.
You picked Yahya afterwards when I didn't. I think you picked Lopez there. But Lopez. So the big thing I will say is, there's no real reason that Matthew Lopez should win this fight that I can see, unless Mitch Gagnon is just not as good a fighter as he has been. I have no idea what to expect from him, but Gagnon has always been this reasonably careful, massive power fighter, where everything he does, whether it's his striking, his wrestling, his grappling, is always puts a ton of power into it. So it's he's very much a pick your spots and explode to defeat his opponents. And Lopez he fights like a young dude who has very little experience. He charges out of the gate looking to overwhelm his opponent immediately with just completely wild, unchecked aggression. And if he can't do that, things start to go south. So it's really going to be down for Gagnon. Can he survive Lopez bull rushing him and trying to just toss him to the ground and wing hooks at him? And I think Gagnon is powerful enough to do that, to survive that, to stave it off. He's survived it against, very similarly styled fighter in Tim Gorman. And if he can do that, then I don't know that Lopez has any of the experience or depth of skill to win a fight outside of the one round. So I'm picking Gagnon here, probably just by decision, but maybe by submission.
Yeah, it's it's a curious choice to be sure, because I think most people would agree that barring the knee injury that's kept him out, Mitch Gagnon is one of the most underrated guys at bantamweight. He's the dark horse. He's this guy who gives everybody a tough fight. His fight with Renan Barão was one of those that I think slightly lowered Barão's stock and slightly raised Gagnon's, because he made that fight so tough. Granted, it was, Barão just after the worst loss of his career, maybe now the second worst loss of his career, but still, Gagnon was in there. He was competitive, and he's kind of just a spoiler. He's fairly technical. He's very well-rounded, and as you said, he's very powerful. So he can basically compete with anyone in this division anywhere. He won't win a lot of those fights, but he'll beat almost everybody outside the top 10. Yep. And Matt Lopez, as you said, he has a ton of potential, but this is not the way to develop it. He needs discipline and experience. He needs time against a slightly lesser level of competition. Give him some fights that are hard, but ones that he can win, so he can reevaluate without losing all of his momentum. And unless Mitch Gagnon really looks bad after the knee injury, which is certainly a possibility, and that's kind of the story of a couple of our weird matchups here, because Jordan Meehan is also coming back from a layoff, and Cub Swanson is coming back from a layoff. A lot of these curious fights where prospects are fighting more established fighters, they do have some little uncertainty about the returning veterans. But in this case, I think the skill gap and the experience gap is too much. Even if Gagnon is diminished, I think he is resourceful enough as a fighter to stop Lopez, who I think really has one really good round in him. And it's only ever looked really good because he overwhelms his opponents. And I don't see Gagnon being overwhelmed. So
yeah, Ronnie Yaya is a pretty entirely overwhelmable under athletic fighter. Like he kind of makes himself great by being so overwhelmable, because he's so tough that people they go out and they're like, oh, I'm gonna beat the crap out of this dude, and then he's still there after 5 minutes.
Honorary Diaz brother Hani Yaya invites you to beat him up more than you actually can manage to do. But yeah, so if Matt Lopez has trouble with that kind of fighter, someone who's not very athletic and is just very skilled in one area and just can take the beating, how's he going to respond to a fighter who won't even have to take that beating as much as Yaya did?
Yeah.
And can compete in every phase, and is actually a grappling specialist himself. Gagnon is kind of a nightmare matchup for Lopez.
And too, I hate to say this, but I'm looking at Rain MMA, where Sherdog has Lopez training out of. Their recent run is not great. Like their fighter, they've Kylan Curran, Ashley Evans Smith. I'm trying to see and not a lot else. Like Mark Munoz and Brendan Schaub were there, and Keith Berry. Like not a lot of really recognizable names who are still fighting at the top end of the sport.
Well, now that Munoz is gone, I think it's maybe taken a toll on that gym.
And there's a real question of how much improving are fighters doing there, because at least, especially with Curran, it's a real she is not improving the way people thought she was gonna, you know?
And that Lopez may be the
So-
same way, like this very athletic up-and-comer who looks like they have a lot of potential, and then Paige Van Zandt at Team Alpha Male, you know, just maybe isn't getting the kind of training they need to actually deliver on that potential.
Yeah. All right. Odds on that fight. Let's see. Gagnon is the favorite, opening at -160, now -155. No real movement on that line. Lopez, the underdog, opening at +120, now +129. Not much movement on that line. I might say that Gagnon is worth a slight favorite bet there.
Yeah,
but
I think so too.
Coming off such a long layoff, it's really hard to trust that.
Yeah, I wouldn't make it a sizable favorite bet, but the odds are forgiving enough that you can still make a little profit off a small bet. And I think it's dangerous usually to assume that a fighter who takes a long time recovering is going to be bad when they come back.
Yeah.
It usually doesn't happen. Usually,
I just don't. I try to just. I assume that I have no idea. That's always my assumption.
Right.
Like if they've taken a couple years off, I don't know.
Yeah, we usually see some effects, but typically they come back when they feel ready to come back. When they have that 2-year layoff, it's because they've done their rehab, they did a practice camp, and they know they're fit to fight again. So I would assume that barring some ring rust, which will probably occur, Gagnon will, by the second round, look more or less like his old self, which means I think he's kind of a lock to beat Matt Lopez.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Which, of course, whenever we feel that way, means Lopez is going to get that first-round submission.
Of course, yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. All right. Women's strawweight bout now. Valerie Letourneau, Viviane Pereira.
Again, questionable decision to match Pereira in this matchup. She's got potential. She needs time. She has beaten no real reputable fighters. She's kind of a lot like Matt Lopez. She's like an overwhelmer, a swarmer who is used to just throwing around fighters who are not good enough or not experienced enough. And Letourneau is probably too big to throw around. She's definitely too experienced. Letourneau has been fighting some of the best women in the sport since the beginning of her career. She hasn't looked great lately, but she also did just have a pretty competitive fight with Ioana and Jacek.
Her not looking great too. Like, there's some real concern about her equipment in that Joanne Calderwood fight because
that's true. She was a little distracted by a pretty crappy fight kit that wasn't fit properly. Yeah, Letourneau is good at distance management, man. That's the big thing here. She's good at keeping people at range, and she's going to have a huge size advantage over Pereira, which only makes that task easier. And Pereira is so reliant on closing the gap and getting inside. And I'm not even sure she can out-wrestle Letourneau if she does get into the clinch. I think Letourneau probably takes her down and gets on top of her. So, I hate to be overconfident again, but this one also feels like a pretty sure thing for Letourneau.
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised to see Pereira win this. It would have to be some real durability issues for Letourneau cropping up suddenly. And like I say, I'm not, that Calderwood loss was weird, but it was weird. Like it's hard to take too much away from that because of the combination of Calderwood's creativity and Letourneau's completely malfunctioning fight kit.
Yeah.
And Pereira, she just chin up, both hands out. I'm going to run at you and throw everything I can at you. And the thing that makes that especially troubling for her UFC career is that it tends to be as a very bad response to getting hit. So when she's on the outside, she will take strikes really poorly, and then respond by bull rushing in with both arms, throwing hooks at the same time and her chin out over her feet.
Yeah.
So
she expects to be able to crumple your confidence with sheer aggression, and that does not cut it once you get to a certain level, unless you've broken your opponent first.
Yeah.
That can't be your first tactic that you go to.
No. So I like Pereira. I think with some good training and with the right camp behind her and some great experience, she could be a great athlete. She could be a great fighter. She looks like a really powerful athlete with a lot of aggression, which is always what you want to see out of a young prospect. But I don't see how throwing her to Valerie Letourneau is going to help that. So odds on that fight, Letourneau is the favorite opening at minus 180 and still now at minus 178. Pereira opening at plus 140, now plus 150. I would say that Letourneau is worth a bet at under 200 odds.
Yeah, maybe. I have more questions about Letourneau than I do Gagnon, to be honest, because even though there was weird stuff with the wardrobe going on in that fight, there were also a lot of reactions that we've seen in other Letourneau fights that kind of make me worry about how she responds to pressure. You know, it wasn't the first time we've seen her get kicked in the face and then kind of turn away and try to call time. So I do, and I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop with Letourneau cutting to strawweight as well. It's a huge cut for her.
True.
At some point, it's got to take an effect.
But it's not like Pereira can kick her in the face.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, the physical difference is going to be so dramatic in this fight that Letourneau really has a huge crutch to lean on there. So I think she's maybe worth a small bet. But what are the other odds here? I mean,
I don't know if there's anything much else. Like, fight goes to decision is minus 165. Fight doesn't go to decision, plus 125. Over 2.5 rounds, minus 180.
You could maybe go under 2.5 to cover in case Pereira gets lucky and Letourneau could outclass her to the point where she knocks her out. That's plus 160.
This is true, although Letourneau, I think, tends to she has a lot of power, but she doesn't have a lot of finishing instinct.
Yeah.
So that even when she hurts people, she doesn't do a very good job following up.
Yeah, me personally, I don't think I would bet on this one, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe not. I'm surprised that Letourneau's only that small a favorite. Pereira deserves no shine as of yet.
Yeah, she's in that Mickey Gall territory where she's maybe even a little more proven than Mickey, but still, like, her record really doesn't mean anything. 11-0 looks good, but if you scroll down that Tapology page, it's not so amazing.
Yeah. And that brings us to Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus Drew Dober, lightweight bout. Is this you or me? I forgot. Let's see. You.
It's my fault, Dan. I always throw it off by just jumping.
Okay, this is me. This should be a solid, straightforward win for Olivier Aubin-Mercier, by all accounts. Dober has made, he started out his career as a workhorse Muay Thai striker without much power. A guy who could go in and be competitive and move forward and, just stay after somebody to win rounds through volume. He was the tough guy in the cage. And since he's got to the UFC and found that really doesn't actually count for much at this level, he's tried to reform himself as a wrestle boxer, as a guy who's going to close down into the clinch and wrestle people to the ground and be dogged in that way. And he actually knocked out Jason Gonzalez, which was pretty remarkable and showed some new potential that he could have. And if he can lean on that, if he can lean on that kind of offensive force that he's never shown before, then he could beat Olivier Aubin-Mercier, who is a powerful striker, but is really uncomfortable striking, very wooden, very much, will sit down on a couple strikes and then get absolutely clocked coming back because he just does not expect the offense coming in return or can't react to it.
He's the new Phil Davis, man.
Yeah. But if Dober is going to have to wrestle Aubin-Mercier, then he's just going to get worked. And that's kind of why I'm picking Aubin-Mercier here, is that I do not yet trust power punching Drew Dober. Even though he's built like a power striker, even though he's got a lot of time as a striker, it's just never shown up enough for me to be like, and that's going to show up again, and he's going to knock Olivier Aubin-Mercier out. I just see him ending up in the clinch too often, and if he does that, he'll end up getting taken down, and he'll end up getting out-grappled. So.
Yeah, it could be. I think I'm going to assume that Dober is going to actually continue improving little by little. I like what I've seen from him since moving to Elevation MMA.
Mm.
And the power punching in the Gonzalez fight, I don't think that was a fluke. You know, it was like somebody took Dober in his camp or a couple camps now, and they said, listen, Drew, get off your damn toes. You got to scare these people off. You know, you have to crack them. And he did it. He got low. He kept his knees bent. He sat down in his punches. I thought it was a really amazing performance from him in a fight that both you and I expected to be fairly close and competitive.
Yeah, I expected Gonzalez to win.
Yeah, and I did pick Dober, but I thought, you know, Gonzalez, crafty, well-rounded striking. I thought Dober would have to wrestle him to beat him.
Yep.
And he didn't. He just knocked him out in the pocket, which is pretty cool to see from a guy who has, throughout his career, been the guy with no knockout power. In fact, he only has 2 other TKO wins, and they're way back early in his career. So to see that emerge late in his career is a good sign to me. I think if Olivier Aubin-Mercier comes out here and really, really commits to wrestling Drew Dober, he can beat him. If he really commits to getting him against the fence as often as possible, if he drags him down, if he tries to take his back, he can beat him.
Aubin-Mercier is committed to that.
Yeah, I'm not confident that he will be, though. That's the thing. A lot of recent fights, he hasn't been. He's kind of gone out there and tried to work on his striking. He goes out there, he's like, all right, well, I'm going to get at least a few rounds of working my straight left and my kicking game. And I think every moment he does that, he's going to make himself kind of vulnerable. And he's going to allow Dober to at least compete in the wrestling if it's not a constant threat while being the better striker. And I do think Dober is the better striker. And I think
that's not hard.
Yeah, and I think he's improving and evolving at a faster rate than Olivier Aubin-Mercier as a fighter overall. You know, Olivier's kind of been the same guy. I have this feeling about Aubin-Mercier that he's going to be a bit disappointing.
He already has been, so that's not really much.
And that happens to prospects. And so at this point, he's still, having only been in the game since, you know, for 5 years, there's still this room to say that, okay, he could, you know, he's had his prospect losses. He could turn this around still and really sort of rise like a phoenix and be this great contender. But I kind of feel like he's going to be a little more along the lines of a Brandon Thatch or a Mike Rhodes, you know, someone who seems to have all this potential, or like a Pedro Munoz, and then never really quite looks like he's figured his game out. And I think Drew Dober is figuring his game out. So my second chancy pick of the card, but I'm going to pick Drew Dober.
You make a good case, and if Dober comes out dedicated to striking and dedicated to maintaining range, then I think he can win. But he's so often dedicated himself to being a wrestle grappler that lately that he's not very good at being.
He's better than you think he would be.
He's better than you'd think he would be, but he's also not, like, he's not competitive at a high level.
No, he's a grinder when he gets into his wrestling game. Like he's really, and to his credit, he can clearly put a lot of strength into his wrestling attempts and still go 3 rounds without issue. Yeah,
and he's got great cardio, but you know that was even the game plan as of his Scott Holtzman fight in January of this year. So it is not a, you know, his power striking is a one fight. So far, like we've seen it once.
There's a very strong chance I'm drawing too many conclusions from it. And also the reason this is a chancy pick is really because I just don't trust Olivier Aubin-Mercier to do something that I think if he did it, he could definitely win.
Yeah.
You know? And
that's fair. That's very fair. Aubin-Mercier is the favorite, opening at -195, moving to -170. Dober at +155, moving down to +144. I'm trying to, let's see.
I put a small bet on Drew Dober, I'll say that, but you should be cautious trusting your own gut feelings. I wouldn't advise anybody else to trust my gut feelings.
I would say that Dober is, well, it's weird because I was gonna say, like, he's close to Chad Laprise, who beat Aubin-Mercier, but Aubin-Mercier has beat other strikers as well. It's just a question, and Dober's takedown defense has never been that great. His offensive wrestling is a lot better than his defensive wrestling and grappling.
Yeah, but nor is Chad Laprise a great wrestler.
Chad Laprise is a pretty good takedown defender, though. He's not a good takedown artist.
He's pretty weak for his size, though. He's not as strong as a guy like Olivier Aubin-Mercier. And so I just think if Olivier comes out and fights that kind of fight, he will lose.
Yeah.
But he'd have to come out and try to get a little work in with his kickboxing for him to lose, I think.
All right. Let's move on to the people's main event and the main event of the prelim card. Nikita Krylov versus Misha Cirkunov.
Well, I'm already committed to opposing Nikita Krylov at every turn.
Yep.
I'm the super hipster MMA analyst. I have to argue with people about John Lineker not being able to beat Dominic Cruz. I have to argue with people about Nikita Krylov not being very good. We did a lot of discussing of this on the Sherdog Roundtable the other night. And the thing that I have to acknowledge with Nikita Krylov is that I think that he's very difficult for somebody like me to understand what the hell is going on, which is why I've picked against him so many times, because he doesn't look that great. There is not really a single area of the game where he is very technically proficient, not with his striking, not with his grappling. He'll have these little glimpses of perfect timing, perfect opportunism, whatever. But everything is really kind of ramshackle. The thing I have to acknowledge is that Nikita Krylov, while he may not be amazing at any specific thing, he's good at fighting. He's good at winning fights. And he's extremely tough and extremely committed to finding a path to victory. And he is getting better. He's certainly not the crazy, wild, swinging man that he was when he made his heavyweight debut against Soa Palele, where he came to the insane conclusion that the only path to victory was to knock out a true heavyweight, which baffles me to this day. He's certainly better than he was then. But as a man of principle, I have to just keep picking against him. and I think this one, as I do in every Nikita Krylov fight, has a chance to go against him. Misha Cirkunov, very strong, better at striking than he's given credit for. We've talked for a while about how he's kind of stiff and awkward on his feet. He looked really good outstriking Yon Kudalaba in his last fight.
Yeah.
He picks him apart, and Kudalaba is a hard man. You need to have a sense of discipline and control to face somebody who's that aggressive and that durable and not have it shake you or affect your game plan in any way. And to see Cirkunov go in there and just patiently pick Kudalaba apart while still making his grappling game a threat was really encouraging for him as a prospect. And I think if he goes into this fight, provided he doesn't get kicked in the head, which will probably happen now that I've brought it up, he can hit Krylov at range with that jab. He can prevent him, because Krylov is not a great boxer. He can prevent him from setting up any power shots, and just have to really watch out for the kicking game. And then if he gets on the ground, I've got to think that Misha Cirkunov is the better grappler. But what the hell do I know? Because Krylov's in here submitting Francimar Barroso. He's in here outstriking veterans and people who are known for their granite chins and knocking them out. So I've already acknowledged that I'm wrong, that Krylov is definitely going to win. But the pick is Misha Cirkunov.
Yeah, I would not be unhappy either way this goes.
To see Krylov become like a bona fide contender would be ridiculous and amazing. But also to see a guy with great promise in Misha Cirkunov ascend to, what seems to be his destiny would also be really nice.
Like, there's no reason that this cannot be another, even just Ovince St. Preux type fight for Nikita Krylov.
Where he gets taken down and just embarrassingly submitted. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is that Krylov has shown he has figured out what his own worst enemies are, and that's pretty damned impressive. He has actually started to understand, if I just rush at people going bananas, that might win me a few fights, but I can actually, I'm tough enough and high enough output and aggressive enough pressure fighter that if I just stay 2 feet further out and pick away at them with continued offense, I can break them. And that's what he did to
Ed Herman.
And that's a lot of what he did to Francimar Barroso too.
Yeah.
Getting just a little bit of patience in his game has made him a world's better fighter.
Oh yeah. like I said, that the Saul Pelele fight, he went in there, Pelele gassed,
Yep.
and then Krylov, who was clearly fresher, emptied his gas tank trying to finish Pelele when he was gassed. I was like, dude, if you had just controlled him, you would have won the fight.
Yeah, my classic description of Nikita Krylov was the kind of dude who would rather light his gas tank, he pours gas tank on himself and light it on fire than conserve anything for a third round of fighting.
He's like, look at all this explosives I have with me. Yeah, he's just going to burn it to the ground in an attempt to get the win now rather than cruising to victory.
And I think that patience, along with the toughness, along with his creativity on the feet, is going to be enough for him here against Cirkunov. Because I think one of the big things, too, about that we've seen ongoing with Kudalaba is that as tough as Kudalaba is, as durable as he is, even as decent cardio as he can have, although he gassed in that Cannonier fight, he can get a little predictable. Like, he tends to fight with these same few setups at this very consistent output pace, and if guys can start timing him, they can just keep picking him off over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really true of Krylov. And I think that Cirkunov is just not, like, I don't think he's dedicated enough to just going out there and throwing someone to the ground and twisting a limb off of them. And if he's not, I think he's going to give Krylov enough time and space to hurt him.
I think Cirkunov, like Olivier Aubin-Mercier, has been working on his striking.
Yep.
Like, putting in a concerted effort to outstrike opponents and treat his grappling like a fallback. But I think he looks more comfortable.
Oh, yeah. I think that the ceiling is much higher for Cirkunov to improve that than for Aubin-Mercier, and to get comfortable and move forward. I think he can be a better fighter, and maybe in like a couple of years he will be a significantly better fighter than Nikita Krylov. This is the toss-up point where I think that Krylov's creativity and durability and aggression still win him this fight.
I'm officially Misha Cirkunov, but I just know Krylov's going to wrap his damn foot around Misha's head. Like, he's just going to kick his head off his shoulders. And I don't know why and how he keeps doing it. I have no idea, but the man is relentless. So Zane got up for a moment. Let me see if I can cover this and figure out how to work these odds. Line movement. There we go. Misha Cirkunov is the favorite here. He opened at -125, and he's at -124. So the odds have basically not changed. Zane, the odds for Krylov, I'll let you do that.
The odds for Krylov is opened at -115 and is now up to +100. So they're still even, but he's gone from being underdog to, or favorite, in the favorite odds, to underdog odds. I would bet on Krylov. I would bet on, let's see, Krylov by KO is +200 at one book. That seems like a reasonable bet. Or in a couple others have Krylov at +169 inside the distance. He's really dangerous and really aggressive, and I think if he wins this fight, it'll probably be because he's able to knock Cirkunov out.
Krylov inside the distance at +169 is pretty tempting.
Yeah. So I can see why people might be giving Cirkunov favorite odds in this fight, but I don't like it. I don't know that wins over Alex Nicholson and Ion Kudalaba are necessary, and Dan Jolly are necessarily as indicative of as beating Ed Herman and Francimar Barbosa and Marcos Rogerio de Lima, frankly.
Krylov has a pretty good light heavyweight resume at this point.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Like, Krylov has shown that he is tougher and better than seasoned vets who aren't, like, dudes who can hang in the UFC and have for a long time. Krylov has shown that he's tougher and better than them, and Cirkunov has yet to show that. So that brings us to the main card: Jordan Meehan versus Emil Weber Meek. Let's see. Yeah, this is a weird fight because Jordan Meehan is one of those fights. Like, I was happy when Jordan Meehan retired because he's fought since 2006. He has a decade of fight. He retired with 9 years of fighting under his belt, and he's been good in the UFC, and he is a dangerous, powerful striker. But he's also been inconsistent. He's very much a live by the sword, die by the sword kind of fighter. And for a kid as young as he is, still only 27, it really feels like Jordan Meehan has become the fighter he's going to be, and what has been that fighter for a little while now. Still training under his dad. You know, he took a couple camps, I think, at like ATT or something like that. But I believe he's been back in Canada for the most of his career. And I don't know. His game it's just both dangerous, and it's full of the same holes it's always had. And he will put on great highlight performances that are much better than you expect, and he will lose fights that you think he's going to win. I do not, however, expect him to lose to Emil Weber-Meek, as to date been more than anything just kind of an overwhelming physical force. That seems to be what has carried Emil Weber-Meek to victory, and it's not necessarily, except for his win over Husamar Palhares, over the best of competition, and it's let him get knocked out a couple times already. Jordan Meehan, even at his most disappointing, is usually, like, you know, other than some early losses where he just did not have submission defense at all, it seems. It's otherwise been to much craftier or much more powerful veteran fighters, or guys who can really match him, and mostly match him for craft, and who can find the technical mistakes in Meehan's game and work on them and stay to them. And I don't think that Weber-Meek can do that. He seems more like the kind of fighter who might stumble onto a problem for Jordan Meehan and hurt him briefly, or take him down and hold him down briefly, and then move on and lose position, or not be able to follow up and do enough of the damage to finish the fight and get himself hurt. Means too dangerous, he's been around too long, and I don't trust Weber-Meek to have the technical depth and the stick-to-itiveness to both hurt and then finish Jordan Meehan.
I'm not really blown away by Emil Weber-Meek. You know, somebody on YouTube comments of his win over Palhares said he's the next Conor McGregor. I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, he's got a beard and a cool haircut, and he's got an accent. I bet that's about it. He doesn't. You watch Conor McGregor's, you know, Cage Warriors fights, you're like, this guy is amazing. He's very, very good. You watch Weber-Meek fight Palhares, and you're like,
yeah,
good job snatching that opportunity when you had it. You know, I think that is the thing that Meek is good at. He's very physically powerful. Obviously, just look at him; he's a physical specimen. He's good in transitions, finding little openings to land a power shot, but he's also, I don't know, he's pretty limited in what he can really do well. There's a lot of just kind of covering up and waiting for the right hand when he's striking. A lot of doing well in transitions, but not creating those transitions. So it kind of relies on you to screw up to capitalize. And, you know, and then as far as the physicality is concerned, I can't accuse Weber-Meek of anything, but it's a little suspicious that he went and had his UFC debut delayed because he was unsure about what might be in his body. That's a smart move if you're a fighter who's just taking supplements and you didn't expect to have USADA looking over your shoulder. It's also a smart move for a fighter who's using serious performance-enhancing drugs. So it's just tough to know if he will even look like his old self coming into the octagon for the first time, since he has admittedly changed some aspects of his supplemental regimen. Jordan Meehan,
I was gonna say he reminds me a bit of like guys like Brian Bowles.
Sure. Yeah. Definitely an athlete, powerful, opportunistic, not necessarily a great fighter.
Yeah.
And to me, this fight kind of reminds me of Mousasi versus Latifi, where this big, like, power punching but pretty limited fighter comes in and just cannot deal with the amount of technical ability his striking opponent has. Meek's not a great wrestler, so he can't neutralize Mian easily by putting him on his back. He's not a great defensive fighter. I have seen him cover up in too many fights and eat uppercuts and straight jabs through the guard. And I think, man, Mian may very well have an opportunity to do to Meek what he did to Mike Pyle, and just kind of put together a beautiful combination and take his head off. I'm pretty confident picking Mian in this fight. All that really remains to be seen is how he'll look after the layoff. I have a feeling that he's going to look good, that he needed some time away from the sport and that the fire came back and he's like, all right, I got to get in there and fight again because I love it. The possibility that maybe he needs some money or something is there as well. So he may come back and look like a guy who still wants to be retired. But even then, I think he's got a pretty strong stylistic advantage. So I think Mian's a pretty safe pick.
Yeah, it just Weber Meek seems like one of those dudes who, like I say, it's a lot of aggression. There's some athletic ability, some power, but it just is going to need more time. Like
he's raw. He's just raw.
Yeah, he kind of got lucky with that Paul Harris fight in that not only has Paul Harris finally seemed to be fading in his career, but that like Paul Harris can't, you know exactly what Paul Harris is doing when he walks in the cage. He came in with this very predictable, like, I'm going to shoot in for a takedown. And
who knows, that's always been Paul Harris too. If instead of committing to that takedown, he'd switch to a leg lock, we could not at all be talking about Emil Weber Meek.
Yeah.
Paul Harris has always walked this really narrow line of I submit you or I get completely blown up in the striking if I can't submit you. And you could perhaps call it good fortune that Emil Weber Meek got the finish before Paul Harris had a chance to really try his side of the game.
Yeah, there's nothing in that win that then goes, this dude is absolute. Like, do you see the technical skill he displayed? It's like, no, he dropped a bunch of elbows on Paul Harris's forehead when Paul Harris shot in for a bad shot from outside.
Yeah. We made the mistake once with Travis Brown of thinking that is an amazing feat and that destines that person for greatness. We made that mistake when we favored Travis Brown over Fabricio Verdum. Never again.
Never again.
You elbow someone who's trying to take you down, doesn't necessarily make you a great fighter.
Mian is the favorite here, minus 140 to minus 158. Weber Meek at plus 100 to plus 133. I would not bet on Jordan Mian at favorite odds.
Is that the line movement or is that the spread?
Sorry, yeah. He opened at minus 140, is now at minus 158 for Mian. And Weber Meek opened at plus 100, is now at plus 133. I would
put a bet on Mian at favorite odds.
I
really have I just don't see what Meek is going to do aside from just landing a big shot. But
the other thing I would say is that Jordan Mian does not have the best record of beating much more athletic, not shop-worn competition.
It's true.
Like, that is a concern. Like, when you look at...
The real difference between Mike Pyle and Emil Weber Meek is that Mike Pyle is 300 years old.
Yeah. Or, Joe Riggs and Marius Zaromskis and Evangelista Santos, even in 2011. Maybe not Zaromskis so much in 2011.
Hey, Zaromskis was pretty good back in 2011.
Yeah, that was in the height of Zaromskis's Zaromkising. So maybe not so much that, but
I think you have a point there. He typically blows out of the water fighters who are really not
athletically
guys he's supposed to beat, who can't compete with him.
Yeah.
But I think this may, in fact, be one of those fights. The only difference being the insane physicality of Meek, which again...
Yeah, I just don't like the idea of betting on a favorite coming off 2 years and, like...
It's only been a year, right?
It has only been a year, true.
Yeah, January 2015. It's been a year and a half. Maybe almost 2 years, actually. So, yeah, that's fair. Almost 2 years.
So... All right. But yeah, as you say, maybe a bet on Mean since he's not a huge favorite. Or actually, how about this? This seems better to me. Mean wins by TKO KO plus 175. That's not even. Yeah. So you can get him
It's not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah. Because Mean's a knockout artist through and through, and whoever
Mhm.
Meek has been knocked out.
Yep. His only 2 losses are both stoppages.
Yeah. So I would maybe put a bet on Mean by knockout.
Sure.
That brings us to Tim Kennedy, Kelvin Gastelum, and go for it.
Another one, man. This one I didn't even mention before because it doesn't feel like a squash match, but we've got yet another fighter on this card returning from a long layoff. I think Tim Kennedy's is the longest by far. It was a pretty dramatic. It was look through the looking glass when I watched his fight with Yoel Romero, which is the last time he set foot in the octagon, and saw sponsors on his trunks.
Yeah.
And I realized how long ago it was that Tim Kennedy last fought in the cage. My assumption is that he'll look something like his old self. Maybe even that it did him a little good to take that time off. I don't know if did he ever make any comments about like losing his passion for the sport or anything, or he just kind of
Kennedy? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think
he wanted more money and he just kind of wanted to take a break. So
yeah, he didn't. I think the big thing is he didn't necessarily want to fight anymore. He didn't like fighting for the UFC.
Yeah,
but he was in the gym all the time.
Yeah,
and talking about fighting all the time. I don't think that it was like it was never. I took a bunch of time off and just lost my passion for training and working and doing it.
Yeah, he was still in there practicing, but it was like his distaste for the UFC overrode his desire to compete. He probably didn't need it, So, Tim Kennedy, man, good fighter, solid, well-rounded, surprisingly good at things he doesn't look that good at. His striking is better than you think it is. His submission grappling is fantastic. Obviously, his top control is some of the best in the sport. He's very smothering when he gets on top of you. And a pretty solid takedown artist as a wrestler. Not amazing, but basically the story of Tim Kennedy is that if he can take you down and keep you down, he is going to beat you. That's basically what happens. And if he can't take you down, he's more difficult to outstrike than you think he'll be.
Yeah, in fact, probably the best way guys have found to beat Tim Kennedy is by being able to thwart his takedown game and then themselves implement a better takedown game.
Sure, yeah. And you kind of have to take away from Tim Kennedy those abilities first. You have to show him that he can't take you down. Kelvin Gastelum can be taken down. That is true. He is also a very good scrambler. So it's interesting. If Tim Kennedy gets him down, can he hold him down? Maybe not. I'm not sure. Can Tim Kennedy consistently get into the range to take Kelvin Gastelum down? Well, Gastelum throws a lot more volume than Tim Kennedy, especially if his last fight is any indication. The fight with Johnny Hendricks, that's what we expected to see from Gastelum when he fought Neil Magny. That's what a Rafael Cordero southpaw kickboxer looks like. He landed about like 125 strikes in that fight. I think he threw well over 200. And those are not numbers that Tim Kennedy has ever approached. He's not a combination striker. He's pretty simple in the ways that he tries to set up his strikes.
He's got a lot of power, enough power to shock people, and then not enough combination striking to actually like knock people out.
Right. He's in that Jeremy Stevens situation where he can hurt you hard, but for most of his career, he's not been much of a finisher once he's hurt you, So I can definitely see Tim Kennedy smothering Kelvin Gastelum, but I don't know how Tim Kennedy will look for sure. Kelvin Gastelum is obviously the king of inconsistency as far as his weight cuts and everything, but he's also looked pretty consistently good in the cage. Even if it at times has taken him a couple rounds to show up, he's always showed up even with his bad weight cuts. And oftentimes we've heard stories about the weight cut being hard, and then he's looked phenomenal. So I think Kelvin Gastelum is still obviously a very talented fighter. and one who can have success at middleweight. But this may be one of the tougher like entry matchups for him if Kennedy can control him on the ground. I am going to favor Gastelum. I think he's got a little more momentum. I think the volume striking, if Tim Kennedy controls him for even a round or two and starts to get tired, I think Gastelum is good enough he might be able to finish Tim Kennedy with strikes. If Tim Kennedy cannot consistently control Gastelum, if he scrambles free or denies him wrestling range, then I think Gastelum can outpoint him, again, possibly en route to a attritive sort of stoppage. So I'm picking Gastelum. It's one of my less certain picks on the card because it's a big middleweight who knows how to use that size and strength to win rounds. So it's tough, but Gastelum for me.
Yeah, I think it's a little weird because, like, I mean, I think one of the big reasons that I have to pick Gastelum here is that I feel like Tim Kennedy can not only, have we seen that if you can shut down his wrestling game and then you take him down and grapple him, that's like a good way to beat him. But I think he can, more than that, he can be frustrated out of his game a bit. I mean, obviously we saw that to great success in the Yoel Romero fight where Yoel Romero fucking around on the stool pissed Tim Kennedy off and really got in his head and really made him lose his cool and lose focus. And Yoel Romero was able to come right out and hurt him. But we've also seen in like the Michael Bisping fight where Kennedy had long stretches of success. There were a few times when Bisping was able to stuff takedowns and get Tim Kennedy frustrated and do some good work. And like, I think that Kennedy can be driven off of his game a bit in ways that have never, or that, he's rarely had to fix because his game has been often so smothering and dominant that it doesn't come up that often that Kennedy feels like he has to adapt to somebody. And I think Kelvin Gastelum can make him adapt. I think Gastelum can get up and can scramble out, can force Kennedy to have to work his takedown game consistently and to work his striking game consistently rather than just being able to get into one mode and take over the fight there. And I think if he can do that, that's how I see Gastelum being able to win this fight is, Kennedy comes out, swarms him, maybe takes him down. Gastelum is able to get back to his feet, reset, and Kennedy has to go through the process again while, against somebody more dangerous, especially than somebody like Michael Bisping at the time, who can hurt him, who can make him pay and make resetting to his feet a more dangerous proposition.
Yeah.
And as that happens, I think Kennedy's game is going to start to fall down a bit more. And
because
so
Bisping, it's kind of forgotten, but Bisping did enjoy some success against Kennedy. The fight was actually relatively close. He just couldn't do anything once he was taken down.
Yeah. And I think that Gastelum doesn't have that same athletic disparity. So I feel like if he can nullify Kennedy's success when Kennedy gets takedowns, he can make Kennedy frustrated and make Kennedy fall out of his game.
Yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised if we see Gastelum's wrestling getting better at Kings. They do wrestling pretty well there. They've got some good wrestling coaches. Worked with guys like Pedro Munoz in the past, who's another really underrated wrestler. And then Verdum is a better wrestler than you think he is. Dos Anjos is a better wrestler than you think he is. Beneil Dariush used wrestling to beat a better striker in his last fight. I wouldn't be surprised if Gastelum, despite already being a grappler who learned how to strike, improved both his striking and his grappling at Kings.
Yeah. The other question here is Gastelum just too small to face a athletic power wrestler at middleweight?
I mean, there's obviously a reason he's resisted going back to middleweight for all this time.
Yeah. He's only 5'9". He's, other than Hector Lombard, he's the shortest guy in the division. So
he's built very solidly. He's even there. I wouldn't say he looks small for 185. He's thick, but he definitely preferred the strength advantage at welterweight. And Tim Kennedy is a strong middleweight as far as 185ers go.
So if Kennedy can implement that strength advantage, if he has a strength advantage and he can just implement that and bully Gastelum, then that could be a major problem. So.
What's up with Tim Kennedy's shoulder? Have you ever looked at his shoulder, Zane? Weird.
I have.
He's got like a drop shoulder where like he has some kind of muscular imbalance. So like one shoulder, he looks like the background in the Mona Lisa. Like one side is way higher than the other, and there's no explanation for it. Just irrelevant non sequitur, but kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies looking at his weigh-in pictures.
So Kennedy is in fact the favorite, opening at minus 170, now down to minus 142. Gastelum opening at plus 130, now down to plus 118. I feel like Gastelum is an underdog line. There maybe is a reason people are jumping on that,
Yeah.
I'm not. This could easily be a split decision mess either way,
I would only take Gastelum because he's an underdog as a bet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just the fact that he stands a better chance than the odds give him, but not one that I would. If he were a favorite, I'm not confident enough in him to put a bet on him at all.
No, and Kennedy is tough as shit to finish, and so is Gastelum. So the chances are this fight is going to be a 3-round scrambling, brawling, back and forth fight in which, it may be incredibly debatable who won each round. So
I'm going to send you a picture of Tim Kennedy's shoulders to look at while we do the next fight. So.
All right. Next up, featherweight, Cub Swanson, Ho Choi. I have to pick Ho Choi here, and I'm not happy about it because I don't think this fight makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think that Cub Swanson has value beyond being a stepping stone at this point in his career still. But what we've seen out of Cub Swanson lately are durability issues. Even, Tatsuya Kawajiri dropped and hurt him. Maybe not dropped, but hurt him bad. And
durability issues with his body as well, having all these injuries, hurting his jaw, hurting his hand. Things aren't holding together too well on Cub Swanson's body.
No. And, he's been through a bunch of wars. He had no feeling in his face for years after that flying knee from Jose Aldo.
And fighting since 2004.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, he's been around a long time.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been knocked out lately. Yeah. I realized this. In fact, that Jose Aldo loss is his only knockout loss of his career. Mm-hmm. But it feels like we're at a tipping point where he's had to rely more. Like his fights with Hakran Diaz and Tatsuya Kawajiri, two dudes not known for their striking. I mean, Diaz known for his ability to stand in a ring and throw punches and kicks, but not his striking ability.
He's known for knowing how to strike.
He's known for looking like Jose Aldo on practice mode in a video game.
He looks like a sleepwalking Jose Aldo.
Yeah, it's like the practice mode where it doesn't throw any strikes that are really going to do any damage, so you can try out all your moves.
Yeah, he's like Jose Aldo in Tekken if you set him to only throw leg kicks.
Yeah.
But slow.
And Swanson has had to struggle a bit in those fights. He's had to work. The Diaz fight, he basically just got an open framed tee off of somebody who's just never going to throw anything dangerous, and Swanson was able to just get creative and land his random shit. But when he doesn't have that time and space, which Tatsuya Kawajiri didn't give him, he had to work really hard to beat Kawajiri in what was almost entirely a stand-up battle.
Yeah.
Ho Choi, he's just not going to afford Swanson any of that.
Yep.
And that's it. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, if Swanson can put him on his back, take him down, keep him down, and out-grapple him and submit him, awesome. Choi has major problems there. And so sooner or later, somebody potentially a Dennis Bermudez or Charles Oliveira is going to find that flaw in Choi and just wreck it at some point. But Swanson wants to strike. Swanson wants to be at range. He wants to be outside. He wants to make you throw hands with him. And I think that's just going to be a Ho Choi knockout at this point. So.
Yeah, some of it to me depends on which Cub Swanson shows up. He is throughout, even when with his really long winning streak, was a guy who was kind of inconsistent. I think kind of the Jeremy Stevens fight was like the microcosm of who Cub Swanson is as a fighter, because you get some rounds where he's just getting tagged, he's just swinging these huge power shots and getting hit while he misses. You have some rounds where he's doing crazy acrobatic handstand kicks and stuff like that, for some of it working and some of it getting weirdly predictable. And then you have rounds where he is controlling Jeremy Stevens with his jab and feinting and walking him into counters, playing with the distance. And those are all things that Cub Swanson can do. And he often does all of them in one fight. And to beat Ho Choi, he needs to do just one of them for the whole fight. And that's the challenge, especially as you said, Cub seems to be kind of fading now. You wonder what his margin of error is for doing something that already he's not proven to be very good at, which is just fighting to a game plan for 3 straight rounds.
I would frankly much rather see Cub Swanson versus BJ Penn right now.
Sure, yeah.
Than Rodriguez versus BJ Penn and Cub Swanson versus Ho Choi.
Yeah, or like Cub Swanson versus Cole Miller or something. Like, give those fights where they'll be fun, but like there's not a lot of pressure. And maybe if he gets a second wind and starts looking really good, you get him back in the title picture.
Yeah.
He's still clearly a very good fighter. He's an incredibly skilled opportunist. Weird little the head kick he dropped Takran Diaz with was completely bizarre. It's not the kind of thing you could possibly train. It's like when Ben Henderson tried to jumping head kick Frankie Edgar when he got his kick caught, or when he tried to flying head kick him from his back. Those are things that you just have to be naturally attuned to, those openings. And the one thing Ho Choi will give Cub Swanson is openings. He's going to be in range. He's not a great defensive fighter. He's there to be hit. But what he's not going to give Cub Swanson is the time and the room to think about those openings.
Yeah.
And as you said, Zane, I think that is something that Cub probably needs if he's going to make the adjustment to become, technical, thoughtful.
Yeah, I mean,
Cub.
the way he made that adjustment in the Jeremy Stevens fight, his last big win, his last meaningful win, was Stevens broke his hand. And then the volume went away. And so then suddenly Cub was getting tagged up in that fight. And then Stevens broke his hand. And then suddenly Cub had all this time and room and space to work out and get creative.
That is true. And he did, I think maybe his best ever performance was the Ross Pearson win, because it was one where he didn't have a lot of time and space. Pearson was bigger. He was coming after him, and he still maintained poise and adjusted. But typically he doesn't do that well when he's got a ton of pressure on him. And so I think that Ho Choi is going to catch him at some point. And I wouldn't be surprised if it went the distance, if Swanson was crafty enough and still tough enough to survive. But his chin has looked questionable. And again, he wasn't knocked out, really, by Jose Aldo. So it does feel kind of weird to talk about Cub Swanson like he's this guy who gets knocked out. His brain was still working in the Jose Aldo fight. It was just pouring out of the hole in the side of his head, But he does look a little shot-worn, a little too hurtable, a little too fragile in many different ways lately.
Yeah.
He's getting on in years. He's had a long career. And Ho Choi is the coming man. So I think Choi is I think he might knock him out.
I will say, though, if Swanson is crafty enough to survive, then there could be a very good chance he submits Ho Choi.
Yeah, definitely.
Very good. Because Choi's ground game is, it's all offense. That's just all of his game is offense, whether it's grappling or takedowns or anything. Like, it's just any time he's in a defensive position, he's at a loss.
Yeah, and with his punches too, like there's some good head movement built into some of those punches. He's done a few like cross counters where he's moving his head offline as he throws. But a lot of it is just kind of him waiting for you to throw it and throwing the moment you do. you know, it's a lot of
it's extremely timing and power based, and
if you know where his head's going, you can catch it. He's there in front of you, and he's gonna throw when you commit to something. So just if you can anticipate, if instead of throwing a straight right at him, you throw a wide right and he dips his head into it, I can totally see something like that happening. I think that will happen to Ho Choi at some point over the course of his development. I just don't really think Cub Swanson's the man to do it.
Yeah. Swanson opened, or Ho Choi is the favorite, opening at -160, now at -226. Swanson opening at +120, now +183. So I'm not surprised that those lines have gotten wider since they opened. Let's see. Swanson wins by submission is +1155.
Woo, those are some odds. I still don't know if I'd bet on it because it's such a chancy thing, but you put $1 on that, you're making $11. So
exactly. Like
maybe.
Given Ho Choi's ground game and the fact that Swanson is actually a pretty good, crafty grappler.
He's very good, yeah.
I'm
going to put $1 on it just so that anybody else who places a bet knows what the line is for what is acceptable to bet on that line, because it's a crazy slim
chance.
But just for funs, we bet for fun, right? I'm not a professional bettor, so no. I'm going to put $1 on that because those odds are nuts.
Yeah, I expected it to be a lot lower than that, frankly. Because at some point, Choi is going to lose, especially most likely by submission. Because his grappling game is just not good. And that brings us to the co-main event, welterweight bout, Donald Cerrone versus Matt Brown. Oh yeah, this is you. Take it away.
Well, you know I love Matt Brown. Everybody does, but he's also from my hometown, so I'm always, I've got to ride with Matt Brown through thick and thin. But the reality is, Matt Brown is 35 years old. He had a miraculous renaissance where he went on this incredible win, followed it up with a competitive loss to the guy who was just about to become the welterweight champion. Had another good performance against Tim Means, and hasn't really looked good in any of his other fights since. You know, and in fairness, Robbie Lawler, Johnny Hendricks, Damian Maia, there's no question that those are the best welterweights in the division. Like those, especially at the time he fought those guys, no shame in those losses. And it was always going to be tough for Matt, you know, once he got to the top of the mountain to stay there, because running through Eric Silva and Mike Pyle and Jordan Meehan, those are all good wins, but they're very different opponents to Robbie Lawler, Damian Maia. But, you know, losing to Jake Ellenberger the way he did is not great. And it just doesn't seem like Matt Brown is ever going to be a consistent, like, win streak kind of fighter again. And it definitely seems like Donald Cerrone has found a new way to be that kind of fighter. Both guys have glass livers, so I could totally see either guy getting hurt by a body shot. Both good body kickers. Matt Brown, great with his knees in the clinch. Both guys dangerous finishers overall. But I just kind of feel like Donald Cerrone, he's got the momentum on his side. I think he's got the more versatile game, and that's really the big thing, is that Donald Cerrone can do a lot of things to beat you. He can fight pretty well moving forwards or backwards. You know, he can counter or he can pressure. He can hold his own in the clinch at the very least. He can take you down and work you on the ground. He has a lot of opportunities here, and Matt Brown really needs to pressure you into the clinch to beat you. And so... And doing that while maybe being a little less durable than he has been in the past, I kind of think Cerrone has to be the pick here.
Yeah, there are two big reasons for me picking Cerrone. One is that Cerrone is very good, and has been in the past very good, about not fighting in the clinch when he does not have the advantage. When he, you know, like that was, I remember that being a big thing people were saying about Cerrone versus Cote. And they were like, oh, but Cote is so big and strong. And, you know, if they get inside, he's going to have this big physical advantage. But you can go back and you can watch Cerrone against, you know, guys like Benson Henderson and, you know, some of these other fights he's had. And when guys close him down and clinch up with him and try to tie him up, he's really good about realizing what's going on, breaking the clinch, and backing out and finding the angle to get away in a hurry. He's not Tim Means, who's going to look at Matt Brown's clinch game and go like, I bet I can beat that guy there.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the it's that, and it's that he's got a really good, well-timed, well-defined takedown game. So that when Matt Brown does swing in and try to build momentum, Cerrone can take him down.
Yeah, I think I look at this fight. I think Brown could have a good first round. I think he's one of the most powerful fighters Cerrone's faced. He can be really surprising with his long reach and his lunging attacks. If he does get Cerrone in the clinch, maybe against the fence, it's going to be a different level of clinch fighting from anything Cerrone has really faced. I also think Cerrone could take Matt Brown down 30 seconds into the fight and submit him instantly if he really wanted to. So,
yeah, I mean, it's just not like Brown. The problem for me with Brown is that, he's amazing at one thing and like super amazing at it, which is clinch fighting. Everything else, he's kind of mediocre at. Like, he's not a good leading striker from range at all. And he was piecing up Jake Ellenberger there, but it's still like the problems are still the same, which is why he ended up getting body kicked and, dropped.
He's okay. He's just really hittable. It's too easy to take Matt Brown out of that game.
Exactly. And he reaches in way out over his hands when he wants to do something more than strike from range. Like, he'll throw a few strikes there and then he'll be charging in with like his chin way out and behind a big right hand. And it's just like he gets cracked there, but he ends up finding the clinch and then working you over. And that's the secret. But I don't think that he can have that success against Cerrone. So it's been hard for him to have that success against the top of the division. It's too limited. It's too one spot only, and anybody who can take him out of that spot can beat him. So Cerrone is the favorite, opening at minus 245, now at minus 281. Matt Brown, the underdog, plus 175, moving up to plus 227. That feels right to me. I don't know if there's any real pick to make there, especially since both guys could easily get finished.
Yeah.
And that brings us to our main event, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis. And I got to go with Max Holloway here. And the biggest danger to me, honestly, is if he somehow decides not to strike with Anthony Pettis. If he decides to out-grapple him or take him down or gets tangled up in Anthony Pettis' ground game. So if he follows him to the ground or something like that. But Holloway is so savvy about staying where he wants the fight that I just don't think Pettis can beat him with that. Like, Holloway's not the kind of fighter who will take a couple shots and then decide like, oh man, I got hit really hard from range, I better close Anthony Pettis down and take him down, or I better rush him and tie him up. He'll take another step back and go back to picking him apart. I mean, it's more like, the kind of things Edson Barboza was able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the athleticism may not be there, but the skill gap in that Barboza fight was on display. Like,
it was dramatic.
You don't need to be as athletic as Edson Barboza to do what Edson Barboza did, potentially.
Especially not if you throw more volume and have a better chin and more confidence in your chin,
Yeah, because Holloway's incredibly tough to hurt.
Yeah.
And even the thing is like looking at somebody like Charles Oliveira, who is a good athlete, but not a great athletic striker. Not a an amazing striking force who turns his athleticism into being a good striker.
Yeah.
And he was able to compete with Pettis and land against Pettis on the feet. He didn't win that battle necessarily, but he competed and he backed Pettis up and he forced Pettis into all the same mistakes that Pettis always tends to make, and was able to hit him hard. And that just seems like if you have a savvier fighter who will not, unlike Charles Oliveira, fall straight into the clinch and then work a grappling game over and over that Pettis can actually beat him at, then does Pettis win that fight? And I don't think he does.
Pettis is the premier sharpshooter under 155 pounds. He has an Anderson Silva-esque ability to find a single opening, and not just by being really powerful, but just being really keen and accurate and having great timing, as well as being, pretty powerful. He can just change a fight in an instant. And because he's so durable, and that's the thing that Anthony Pettis does not get enough credit for, is just how hard he is to hurt and especially to put away. Because he's so durable, it's like a sniper with a really, really steady bipod under the barrel of his gun. No matter how hard you hit it or try to rattle him around, you just can't knock that barrel off the target. And you can convince the guy not to pull the trigger, or you can avoid all the shots, but it's still going to be trained on you the whole time. And that's the big danger for Max Holloway in this fight, is that he absolutely is poised to outwork Anthony Pettis with volume. He's absolutely poised to prevent any attempts Pettis might have to take him to the ground. He's so versatile and flexible with how he can fight that he has a number of ways to outpoint Anthony Pettis down the stretch, but he's probably not going to finish him, at least not until much later in the fight, especially if Pettis gasses. He's probably not going to finish him early, and that means he's going to have to spend at least 3, 4, most likely 5 rounds in there with a really dangerous finisher. And Pettis is not only super accurate, but like Anderson Silva, has fantastic killer instinct. You don't get unhurt when Anthony Pettis hurts you. You know what I mean? You stay hurt until you're out or until the referee saves you. He with just accuracy and commitment to getting you out of there. And then, of course, the ground game, as you said, is really dangerous. Holloway's not a bad grappler. He's significantly better than he was in the start of his career. But I wouldn't trust him to tangle with Anthony Pettis in a prolonged grappling exchange.
No, I mean, he's not Charles Oliveira good, and Oliveira ended up getting worked on the ground.
Oliveira got submitted. So, yeah, I think Pettis to me, we've talked about Pettis kind of being figured out a lot and people kind of knowing what his weaknesses are. That doesn't change the fact that Anthony Pettis is still basically the same guy to me who won the title. I don't think he's really deteriorated all that much. I just think opponents have built off of one another's success and figured out consistent ways to beat him. Can you back him into the fence? Can you take advantage of the fact that he doesn't have great footwork or phenomenal defense? Can you get him to wait too long for that one shot? Can you control Anthony Pettis without putting yourself in danger? If you can, you can beat him. So for that reason, Max Holloway is a deserved favorite in this fight. He's on a tear. He's probably about as tough as Anthony Pettis. He throws about 3 times as many strikes, and seems like a guy who is just cut out for 5-round fights. I think he may be the most likely guy to finish Anthony Pettis of all the people that Pettis has fought, if he can get to those 4th and 5th rounds, because what we've seen from Max Holloway so far in 3-round fights is that his 3rd round is always his best. He builds and builds in volume and accuracy and effectiveness, and he's never looked tired. So if that pattern holds true for a 5-round fight, we are in for a treat when we start to see Max Holloway in the championship rounds.
And I would also say for Holloway, to a very positive advantage for him here too, is that he kind of just faced and beat somebody like Anthony Pettis in Ricardo Lamas. Not that they're like mirror images of each other and that, like Ricardo Lamas is a great, like, exact copy of Pettis, but in like a fighter that you can outwork patiently, but if you start opening up and making mistakes, will sting you and hurt you.
Yeah.
Somebody that you have to be controlled with and you have to be cautious with, but that you can back down and that you can outwork and that you can outpoint and that you can fight a safe game plan with. And Holloway did that pretty picture perfectly.
Yeah, I think the fights may end up looking pretty similar, actually.
Yeah. On Odds on this, Holloway is the favorite, coming in at minus 185 and now down to minus 201. Pettis, the underdog, starting at plus 145 and now up to plus 166.
What's Pettis inside the distance?
Pettis inside the distance is plus 390.
I mean, I wouldn't dare pick it, but the opportunity's there, man. That's one of the best finishers in the UFC, even to this day.
It's true. Anthony Pettis, let's see. His last decision was his split decision over Jeremy Stevens in 2011. He has otherwise finished every other one of his fights since, and otherwise it was his decision against Benson Henderson in the WEC in 2010. And those are two of the there are only 3 decisions on Pettis' entire record.
As far as wins, right?
Yeah, only 3 decision wins on his entire record. And all of his losses are by decision. So
hard to finish, very good at finishing is the story of that record.
Yep. Better finisher than Max Holloway. And absolutely. So a chance bet on Pettis inside the distance at plus 390 is probably not the worst underdog bet in the world if you want one there.
Yeah. And I would be very hard pressed to see Pettis winning by decision. So I think that is about as safe as picking him outright with substantially better odds.
Exactly. All right. That brings us over to this Fight Night Albany card that we are going to try to crush.
To run through it. Unless you had any final bet thoughts on that first card, but I honestly think we should just keep running. They'll have the timestamps. They can look back at the ones that I bet on.
Let's go to now opening a women's strawweight bout. We are UFC Fight Night Albany. Entirely a Fight Pass card. I did not realize this. That makes me 1,000 times happier. I thought it was Fox Sports 1. So
it's so much easier to deal with bad fights when the pacing is rapid fire.
Yeah. I'm actually now excited for this because I got to work it tomorrow. So that makes me much happier. I can easily set aside 4 to 5 hours for a quick Fight Pass card rather than 6.5 for another UFC event or an FS1 event. All right, so that opens with a strawweight bout. Juliana Lima, JJ Aldrich, take it away.
Is JJ Aldrich a late replacement here? Is she filling in for Tatiana Suarez, I think?
Yep.
Yeah. She should still be in pretty good shape, though. She just won a fight at Invicta FC 20 on the 18th of November.
Yeah, so, she's probably,
Yeah, and she won that fight without really taking a scratch and won it pretty dominantly and really showed off some great skills. I think those actually may be the skills that get her a win here. I think I've never been blown away by Juliana Lima. I kind of want her to be better than she is. The problem is she just doesn't throw enough. She just doesn't do enough to win her fights. And so you have a lot of these bouts where she clearly has some physical and technical advantages, some talents and skills at her disposal, but somehow doesn't turn that into great fighting. You know what I mean? JJ Aldrich, I think, is probably less athletic. She's certainly a little smaller, but she consistently shows that she knows how to win fights. Southpaw boxing is the main thing that she does. She can pressure. She can move backwards. She's got a really accurate straight left hand. She's pretty comfortable in the pocket, surprisingly so for someone as young and inexperienced as she is. And she has been submitted in her career, but Lima is not a phenomenal grappler. She's okay on the ground, and she's big enough to probably take someone down if she wants to, but it's not really her game. She's kind of this fairly powerless Muay Thai with stalling in the clinch. I can see her doing that to Aldrich, but I think any moment she has at range, she's probably going to eat 3 shots for every one that she lands. So if Lima can really press her size advantage and control Aldrich, I think that's her path to victory here. But if it's a striking battle, I think Aldrich has the stylistic edge.
Yeah, if it's a striking battle, I think Aldrich will win it. But I think the actual story for Lima has always been that while she's nicknamed Jutai, in actual competition, she's a wrestler. That's
fair. That's actually fair. Yeah.
She is always looking to come out and pressure and take opponents down and just kind of go with a lay and pray game plan. She gets on top. She doesn't do a lot. She holds position,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Uninspiring wrestling.
Yeah, uninspiring wrestling. The thing is that a lot of women aren't good enough at wrestling. Like Lima is one of the few takedown artists who will actually shoot like regular takedowns out there and do so consistently. And so the question with Aldrich, and it's not really a question I think that's firmly answered, is can Aldrich stay up and can she stuff takedowns? And if she can't, I think she'll lose. And if she can absolutely win. I think so far, though, the only people who have beat Lima are people that can significantly out-wrestle or out-grapple her on the ground. So you have Kacha Kankanpa, who's a good grappler off her back and a good crafty grappler. And then you have Jędrzejczyk, who can absolutely shut that takedown game down. And then you have Carla Esparza, who is just a better wrestler. And I don't know that I trust Aldrich to be there yet. I think that Aldrich is probably the better long-term fighter, but Lima's big, and she tends to press a grappling game, and I'm picking her here.
That is fair. You're making me nervous now, Zane.
It's just, they keep feeding Lima these, like, undersized, underwhelming, or these underdeveloped prospects that she just beats to an uninspired decision that nobody cares about.
Yeah. You kind of forget about it, as I did before.
Yeah, so Lima is opening as the favorite, minus 215, moving down to minus 240. And Aldrich opening at plus 165, now up to plus 194. So if you believe as Connor does, then there's an underdog bet to be made on JJ Aldrich there. But I think I'm taking Lima here. I do think the odds are a little wide on Lima, maybe. Yeah. But she's kind of like, like I say, losing only to Esparza, Jędrzejczyk, and Kankanpa, like, that's a pretty decent level.
Yeah, that's pretty good. You're right.
So, but then again, her wins aren't inspired either. What's Lilani Trolozzi, Nina Ansaroff, and Erica Almeida? That's not.
You don't really feel like you have a good idea of what level Juliana Lima's actually at. Like,
yeah,
she loses to fighters who are obviously way better than her. She beats fighters who are obviously not at all ready for the UFC. And where is the middle? What's the line of how good a fighter has to be to really beat her?
So we'll find out if Aldrich is over it. She certainly could be.
Yeah.
Oh shit, my dog's about to go nuts.
I can tackle this next one if you want. All right, I'll do the read-in here. I'm guessing that Zane has a mailman at the door or something. Our next fight is a middleweight matchup between Keith Barish and Ryan James. Even though I took the last one first, I will just give you a really quick pick here. Ryan James, I think, is the more dangerous fighter, and that's why I'm taking him. Barish kind of strikes me as sort of a one-note wrestle boxer without a lot of dynamism. James is hittable. He's awkward, but he seems to have good stamina and a good chin. He's got a really effective submission grappling game. I think at some point he'll find a way to win, but there is so little footage out there on either of these guys. It's really, really hard to get a great picture of the stylistic matchup.
Yeah, I just don't trust Barish to be good enough to be in the UFC. I don't know that James is either, but Barish looks like a guy who really is not athletic and depends on being stronger than his opponents.
He strikes me, he really reminds me of Hector Urbina.
Yeah, no, you know who he reminds me of? Bubba Bush.
Okay, sure.
Who just, people were like, oh, but he's a good wrestler, and then he just kept getting, like, either knocked out or submitted. Like, if he took somebody down, they'd submit him. If he stood with somebody, they'd knock him out, and that was it.
Sure.
And that feels like this. I think James can get a submission. He looks like a crafty grappler, but like you say, there's no tape. I have no real idea. James is the favorite to an absurd degree, minus 260 to he opened at minus 260, now at minus 267. That line hasn't really moved at all. Barish, the underdog, plus 180 to moving out to plus 214. I would not bet on this fight to save my life. These guys, there's nothing to say on them at all, but there should not be this wide a spread either.
Worst fight on the card in terms of interest and relevance? I think it may be.
It's just a trash fire. I don't know. There's no tape on either of these guys except for Barish getting absolutely worked by
Robert
Drysdale, and that's it. So,
yeah.
All right, that brings us to a lightweight bout: Frankie Perez versus Mark Diakese. Do you want to take this because you were supposed to, or should I take it because
it doesn't matter to me, whichever you prefer?
All right, I'll talk first because I haven't got the chance. Perez is this fight to me is all about how Mark Diakese shows up and if he learned anything from fighting Lucas Sayevsky. Because Diakese fought Lucas Sayevsky like he could not possibly lose. Like there was just no way that the guy in front of him could compete with him in any way, shape, or form, which you want in a young fighter. Like you want young fighters to be confident, but you have to have some understanding that the person in front of you can actually fight back at all, like can do anything. And Diakese just was like, I'll charge at him and throw a funky flying knee that has no hope of landing and then see what he can do. It's like, oh, he can take me right down and then lay on top of me and make my life hell for a while. And the moment he stopped fighting like that, he beat the piss out of Lucas Sayevsky. Frankie Perez is a better athlete than Lucas Sayevsky and is a well-rounded fighter, not a bad wrestler, good grappler, has some power in his hands, does not take punches well, and is not a comfortable striker. Like he's a more powerful and better timed striker than he is actually a good striker. That knockout over Sam Stout that he had really says a little more about Sam Stout than it does about, or said a bit more about Sam Stout than it does about Frankie Perez. And then we've seen Frankie Perez in against Johnny Case get absolutely out wrestled. And so there's no like, Perez is not an exceptionally great at anything fighter. He's tough and he's a little better at everything than you would think.
His striking's like Leonardo Santos a few years ago.
Yeah, and he's got those long arms and big hands, which means he's got some more natural power that he can kind of rely on when he's picking his shots and not throwing that much. But Diakese, he's got power takedowns. He's been a good controlling fighter. He's been an okay controlling fighter from top position when he gets it. Not as good as he should be, but not awful. And then he's got great dynamic striking with a lot of power. And so I think he should be able to win this. But if he fights Perez, like Perez just has nothing for him at all, Perez can absolutely submit him or hit him hard or something like that.
Yeah, I think Diakese needed that fight with Lucas Sayevsky. Lucas Sayevsky, I suppose it is.
Yeah.
I think he needed that fight because he did learn that there is a level of opponent, and he's had a couple tough fights in the past, but always come through. So maybe he won't actually take the lesson away that he should have from that until he loses. Yeah. But he did at least have the opportunity to see that he can't go in there and just be a maniac and expect to run roughshod over everyone they put in front of him. And Frankie Perez, I think, is on a fairly similar level to Lucas Sayevsky. He's, as you said, maybe a better athlete, probably not as comfortable with the striking, maybe not quite as capable of being aggressive and really pressing an advantage when he has it. Those are things Sayevsky does well. Diakese, though, he's showed that he has some mental fortitude. Even if he comes in overconfident, it does not break him to realize that he's not his opponent isn't as outmatched as he thought. He adjusts well. He's like, all right, well, reality check, time to beat them anyway. And that's what he's done several times throughout his career. As his striking continues to develop, it becomes more and more a very powerful complement to his relentless wrestling game. And while, as you said, Zane, he's not an amazing controlling fighter on the ground, he is relentless with his attacks, his advancements of position, his reversals, his takedowns, constantly working to improve, sometimes to the point where it makes him vulnerable because he's so aggressive. But I don't think Perez deals that well with pressure. And so I think that will actually be a boon for Diakese more than a drawback. So I think Mark Diakese by, a knockout wouldn't shock me, but I'm going to go with decision.
Diakese is the favorite. He opened at minus 300. He's at minus 305. Perez, the underdog, opening at plus 220, now up to plus 243. There might be a chance bet on Perez as an underdog here. Just, because the line's decently wide. There's some hype going on Diakese, and he's showed in that Sayevsky fight that he's very open to, he has some Warlley Alves in him. And as we've learned from Warlley Alves is ripe to be upset by less athletic fighters than him.
Yeah. I hope he goes the route of Kamaru Usman rather than Warlley Alves.
Yeah.
Two guys who very similar prospects as fighters who just crossed paths, and we got to see which one is the more reliable.
See, Perez inside the distance is even plus 471 if you wanted to really sweeten the pot. And I think if Perez wins, it would probably be because he submits Diakese.
Yeah, that's not bad.
That brings us to Tiago Trator versus Shane Burgos. Go after it.
Yeah, this is one of those fights that really doesn't mean much, but should be pretty fun. So this one, the redeeming value is that it'll be like a nice intermission in the middle of the card. I don't have to think about prospects or who's relevant or what matters. I can just watch some guys slug it out. Shane Burgos looks like he has potential, but it's another kind of curious matchup, bringing him in against a pretty experienced fighter without really giving him much time yet. I mean, Burgos is in a weird position because most guys – Tapology keeps rankings for fighters. I think they're kind of computerized rankings, so they're not amazing, but they keep rankings based on the importance of people's wins and how well they're doing. And typically you'll see like a dip.
We lost Connor here briefly. He should hopefully be right back. He's always off for a moment. There he is. He's right back. Hello? Sir, can you hear me? Yes, no. Is he back yet? So we're talking about. Okay, you're here.
Ooh, yeah, I'm finally back. Took a while loading. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, you're talking about dip.
Yeah, typically you will see a dip from. They have these bar graphs, and you'll see a dip from around the 200 ranking area to like 170 before they get picked up. Burgos hasn't done enough to prove himself in that way yet. He's still ranked around 200 on Tapology because he's only got, 7 wins? Over, okay competition, but nothing great. Most guys with around a 50% record or no more than 6 or 7 wins. So Tiago Trator, he's had his fair share of like beating up guys who are not fit to fight him, but he's also been in the UFC for a little while now, has a few solid wins under his belt, like Clay Collard and Akbar Areola. I think really the big thing here for Shane Burgos is I could see him, he's a pretty good counterpuncher, and I could see him clipping Trator on the chin the way Mike De La Torre did. Trator is not the most durable guy in the world. He's a little wide open defensively, tends to kind of get wider when he starts throwing, but he is aggressive. He's a solid wrestler. He's got good ground and pound. He's just feels like the more reliable fighter at this time. So unless Burgos catches him with a perfect right hand, which he is capable of doing, I'm going to pick Trator to win this one.
I cannot follow you on this road, honestly. Tiago Trator is somebody I really liked coming up, but I think in the UFC I have seen some severe limitations to his game.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
And a lot of them, unfortunately, appear to be physical limitations. He's just not a big featherweight. And more than that, he's not a strong one. Like, he's 5'9", but he's just kind of reedy in the cage. And for a guy that really, cut his teeth coming up in Brazil as somebody who would, push people around and be, the physically, the overwhelming cage grinding, get you into the clinch, put you against the cage, and just chip away at you for round after round on the regional scene. that doesn't translate to the UFC because he's not big enough to do it. This is why he goes to a split decision with Clay Collard and takes Akbar Areola to a unanimous decision. Like, two of the more underwhelming featherweights the UFC has picked up lately.
You will eternally underrate Akbar Areola, Zane.
He was not good.
You said that when I said I thought he would give Jake Matthews a tough fight.
The moment Jake Matthews realized that he was getting a tough fight from Akbar Areola, he pantsed him.
Yeah.
It's Akbar Areola he's exactly the product of a long record against bad competition, which is that he had a great grappling game off his back and could be submitted, and a good kicking game from range and could easily be outstruck.
He makes the best faces when he fights, though. He's the most nervous, pound for pound, most nervous fighter in MMA history.
So anyway, Tiago Trator, I think that physically he's underwhelming, and the problem for him is that to beat Burgos, he's really going to have to go right into where Burgos wants the fight. Burgos is a 6-foot featherweight. He's big. He's powerful. He's got a tight boxing game. He's got a good submission game. His game links up together really nicely. Like, one part flows to the other really well. And he's great in the clinch. Like, he's good at framing there and at landing powerful shots and at hitting trip takedowns from the clinch and then going straight into the ground game and grappling well there. And I just don't have any trust that Trator can be physically overwhelming anywhere enough to drive Burgos out of his comfort zone. Burgos is probably his biggest problem is that while he's a consistent output striker, he's got like ridiculously long arms and huge hands. He tends to be a little like, he'll just kind of stalk straight in and let you hit him while he looks to land his shots. But I don't see Trator having the power to make him pay for that. My only real concern, I remember when I scouted Burgos a little while ago for our scouting report, was that he had sclerosis as a kid and he's had spine surgery.
Really?
Yeah. And so that kind of is one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of potential for you to get badly injured again in your MMA career if you have spine problems. So
for sure, yeah.
But as long as that's not a problem, I think he's got a ton of potential. So I'm pretty high on him. Let's see. Burgos is in fact the favorite entering this bout, opening at -165 now to -172. Trator opening at +125 now to +144. I like those odds personally. Even as close as they are, I don't think that Trator is worth an underdog bet.
I wouldn't bet on this fight either way, really.
Yeah. I think the odds are right, but even if you don't, I would not bet on it. And I would not bet on it in any other way. Burgos is a proven finisher and maybe not proven, but a great finisher so far in his career. And Trator has not been the best finisher, especially not at the UFC level. So there's not even like Trator is pretty durable though, so it's not even like I know Burgos is going to knock him out or Trator is going to submit him or anything like that. I just think there's nothing there to play with.
Yeah, Burgos, since at the distance, is only +154. It's not huge.
Yeah. That brings us to a middleweight bout: Andrew Sanchez, Trevor Smith.
Right.
Yeah. This is a weird fight. This is another one where it's kind of like you've got the young prospect who's got a lot to prove, and you're throwing him in there against a super seasoned vet who, frankly, can potentially compete in the area that your prospect is best. Like, Trevor Smith is... The weird thing for Trevor Smith is, for like you see like not that athletic white dude, like grizzled white dude, and you automatically think, oh, this dude wrestles. Like, he's a wrestler. And Trevor Smith is really more of just a grappler. Like, that's really kind of the core of his game. He's become a good wrestler, I think, throughout his UFC career. And he started out as a junior college All-American, so he obviously he's had some wrestling going up, but his MMA career has not been necessarily predicated on him being an overwhelming wrestler so much as it's been him being a really good lockdown grappler.
Yeah.
And, with Andrew Sanchez, you've kind of got somebody who's playing the, what's Jason Sago or the, what's the Polish lightweight? Damn it, who had that really surprising upset win not long ago. Underwhelming looking kind of white dude. Anyway.
Held?
No, not Marcin Held. The guy who's in the UFC before Marcin Held, the Polish lightweight, who's not the whale. Well, not him, but the other guy.
I'll think of it.
Anyway, it's that classic, like, the grappler who kicks a lot. Yeah. Is the style that Sanchez really seems to like.
Yeah.
But he is a very good wrestler and grappler. And he's got a very creative kicking game. And it's just a question of, is that actually going to be functional enough to beat Trevor Smith, who is just this gritty kind of, get in there, get in the clinch, try to drag you to the ground and outwork you on the ground. Sanchez doesn't set his takedowns up from outside very well because he likes to rely on a range kicking game. He tends to have to shoot from too far out and then chain his takedown attempts once he gets in on them. He is a very good chain wrestler, though. I don't know. I just kind of feel like Smith is going to be able to... It's a real test of Sanchez's athleticism, really.
You were thinking of Damian Stasiak, by the way.
Yep. No, I wasn't thinking of Damian Stasiak. He's a featherweight, or he's a bantamweight.
Who the hell were you thinking of?
I'm thinking of...
Bartosz Fabinski?
No, he's a welterweight. Lightweight, dude. Lightweight.
The only lightweights are Held.
Or maybe he is a welterweight. Crap. Go up to welterweight. Yeah, he's a welterweight. Whatever.
So it's Fabinski. That's the only Poland at welterweight in the UFC.
No, go up further. He's going to be up in the division. He's had 2 stints in the UFC now. He's on his second one.
He's no longer in the UFC, or
No, he is. He's on his second stint in the
According
UFC.
to Wikipedia, the only Pole at welterweight in the UFC is Fabinski.
Oh, he changed his thing to Jamaica. Remember that? He decided he wanted to be
I don't know who the fuck you're talking about. I'm really interested to find out now, though.
Why aren't you using my list and not Wikipedia's?
Because I didn't know if you had a thing where I could search by nationality.
Well, the flags are there, but it doesn't have the...
Yeah, I wanted to be able to control F.
No, let me see.
This is a complete derailment, but I'm really curious to know who this Jamaican Polish fighter is.
And he's not actually Jamaican. He's Polish German, and he got so tired of people asking whether he was Polish or German and how he could make that distinction that he was like, okay, fine, I'm Jamaican from now on.
Really?
Yep. It is
Yasunayari? He's German.
No, it's Peter Sabota.
Oh. Okay, yeah. I've always thought of him as a German guy, not even as a Polish guy.
No, he's Polish. Polish born, lived in Germany lately. Well,
he's Jamaican now.
He got so tired of people asking him about that because it was like he lived in Poland, I think, until he was like in his teens.
Yeah. Well, sorry for the major derailment, but I was very curious to know.
So he's got that same kind of Peter Sabota,
Jason
Tiago game.
Yes.
And it's a question, like I said, it's just a question of like how good is he at that game against a really seasoned vet? Because he couldn't get a win over Kevin Casey using it, and that was like for a lot of people, Sanchez was like a top prospect, and I was really kind of surprised by that. Because I just kind of immediately, when I was scouting guys, just was like, nah, I'm not looking at Andrew Sanchez. He lost to Kevin Casey. Like, that's all I need to know. But he won tough. And he's got this good game that looks like it's rounding itself out. He's got a lot of skills. I'm just not sure that it's ready to beat seasoned veterans yet. And his losses to date kind of tell me that too. So I'm going to pick Trevor Smith here to shut down the distance wrestling game and not get sucked into this range kicking game. And grind out a win. But I'd love to see Sanchez get the win, and I've underrated him a lot in his career, so I have a history of it.
I think size may be the big thing for Andrew Sanchez in this matchup. Trevor Smith is a grinder. He's a solid grappler. He's not a huge middleweight. And
he's
Sanchez,
6'3", but
is he even that big? That may be an overestimation. Also, maybe the fact that he has this weird crooked backed crouch makes him look smaller than he is.
He's got this weird crouch. He's not a physically over. He used to be like more jacked, but he's gotten thinner lately.
He doesn't seem like an overwhelming physical presence in the cage. And Andrew Sanchez is more like that. He's definitely very strong. A lot of his wins on tough kind of look like him just completely surprising his opponent. I mean, that's how the Khalil Roundtree fight looked. Khalil Roundtree is a guy who relies almost entirely on strength and is not a great grappler. And Sanchez had the right combination of overpowering strength and grappling ability to control him in that fight. I think he can do that to Trevor Smith. I like Trevor Smith a lot. I think he's a great spoiler. He often turns in these surprising efforts, makes people work really hard to beat him. Or beats guys who are on a roll, and he could, Andrew Sanchez could be another Joe Gigliotti, but I just don't think Trevor Smith is like a dominant enough physical fighter to show Andrew Sanchez something he's not used to. I don't think he can't take advantage of the fact that Sanchez relies on kicks by outboxing him because he's not a great boxer. And he might get knocked out if he does get into a brawl because that happens to Trevor Smith sometimes, early knockouts. And I don't think he can really overpower him on the ground enough to apply what might be an experience and skill advantage. So I think Sanchez by decision is my pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's just one of those prospect crossroads things where, Trevor Smith is like the dude you have to beat to prove that you can be in the UFC kind of thing.
He's the gatekeeper to the promotion for middleweight.
Odds on that fight, Sanchez is the favorite coming in. He's opened at -130. He's now out to -204. Trevor Smith opening at -110, now at +168. So it's opened up close to even. Odds have only gotten wider since then. I don't know. I don't like it because the big problem for me with Sanchez is just who has he beat so far in his career, Yeah. And it's other young fighters who have a lot to prove and who do not have deep records or who are not great athletes. He ran through some good prospects, but when he fought more seasoned guys like Kevin Casey and like Dustin Jacoby, he lost. And I'm not sure, in his Khalil Roundtree fight, he had trouble getting Khalil Roundtree down before Roundtree gassed. He does shoot from too far out, and then he has to chain his takedown attempts together. And if that doesn't, he had a big technical advantage there over Roundtree, but if he doesn't have that technical advantage, it's a question of does he just get shut down completely there and then have to rely on this funky outside striking game?
Yeah, considering the fact that this could be a lot like Yaya versus Matthew Lopez. Considering the fact that Trevor Smith's specialty is the place where the younger, less experienced fighter wants to take this fight, I think those odds are wide.
Yeah, so worth looking at. I don't know if you want to bet on Smith as an underdog, but
what's Smith by decision?
Smith by decision
he probably wins. He's a submission artist, but I don't really see.
Is +178, which is almost no difference. No. Smith inside distance is +425. So
maybe.
No, wait. He's not by decision. Smith by decision is +458. +458. There we go.
Yeah, I think if he wins, it's probably a decision.
It is. It's a grinding decision. So +458 for Smith by decision is probably.
That's not a bad bet.
That's not a bad bet. Because he does have a habit of being a spoiler.
Yeah.
And that brings us to middleweight bout Joe Gigliotti versus Gerald Meerschaert.
Speaking of Trevor Smith being a spoiler,
Joe
Gigliotti completely outworked by Trevor Smith in his UFC debut. Looked pretty bad.
Go ahead.
Very physically imposing fighter. Pretty dangerous, pretty limited. kind of like Emil Weber-Meek in a lot of ways, where
Yeah.
if he can impose himself on you, it's going to look bad. But he also, unlike Emil Weber-Meek, doesn't really seem that good at going the distance. Meek has at least, gone the stretch a few times, has proven his ability because he doesn't throw too much and waits on his opportunities. He can do that for several rounds. Gigliotti is an aggressive fighter. He wants to overwhelm you, and that really cost him against Trevor Smith. He completely gassed and then got just worked on the ground. And that does not give me a lot of confidence in him going forward, if I'm honest. It doesn't immediately consign him to prospect hell, but it's just not that encouraging. And then, Gerald Meerschaert, maybe not like the guy to beat a guy like Gigliotti, but the one thing he has is a lot of experience against solid fighters. Meerschaert's been fighting for a long time. I recognized his name instantly because he was dotting the record of one of my other favorite journeymen, Sam Alvey, and he and Sam Alvey traded wins with each other a couple of years ago. Meerschaert, pretty well rounded. Weird, eccentric kind of striking. I don't even know if eccentric's the right word. It makes it sound like it's like fun and creative. It's just kind of weird. Shockingly good with his
kind of tips over and throws something at you while he's tipping over.
Yeah, it's eccentric makes it sound like it's an affectation. It's more like Meerschaert isn't that good of a striker, but he still manages to outstrike a lot of people, stalling them in the clinch, takes a shot really well, and just kind of fights at a steady pace. And I think that, unless Gigliotti's made some serious changes, is going to be a problem for Joe going forward. Somebody who just fights consistently round after round is going to have an innate advantage over the guy who gasses if he can't finish you in the first. So I am taking Gerald Meerschaert by decision.
Yeah, the only real question here with Meerschaert is that he's I don't know that he's also that great of a wrestler either. He seems more like a trip and drag kind of guy from the clinch. And all his losses are by submission, with the exception of the Alvey one, which is by decision. And so
Gigliotti is a Matt Serra fighter too, isn't he?
No.
Who is he? Renzo Gracie? He's got some like serious jiu-jitsu at behind him, doesn't he?
I'm pretty sure he fights out of Arizona, one of the camps in Arizona. He's a power MMA.
Oh, okay. So still solid. Still a solid camp.
Yeah. And Gigliotti is a good submission fighter. Like, that's the big thing for him, is that he wants to bully people in the clinch. And this was what really wrecked him against Trevor Smith, is that he had to drive into the clinch. And the moment he couldn't win that clinch battle, he was fucked.
Yeah.
He tends to bully people into the clinch, hurt them, jump on them, and submit them. And Meerschaert is a very, create scrambles, not necessarily win them all on the ground kind of fighter. So there are going to be opportunities, I think, to win, and to win early, to win fast. Like Meerschaert, all of his submission losses are in the first round, all of them. So there definitely seems to be a ability for him to charge out and do something sloppy and weird and get immediately sucked into a submission loss. But yeah, he's got too much success that is experience and success just being funky and tough and outworking guys. I think I have to eventually pick Meerschaert. I think Gigliotti's just not ready for this level of competition at all right now, and he needed more seasoning, and he got brought up because he had a couple of impressive fast wins, and that's not necessarily the best way to bring someone up.
He was what I expected Mike Perry to be. What I mean? Like, he's just not ready. And I think did they even debut on the same card or something? And I'm like, man, these guys who are dangerous but not good enough yet.
It was Max Griffin and Mike Perry.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah. So, or like Max Griffin, a similar story there.
Although Max Griffin's had a lot more time. His fun thing is just he's into this funky, weird martial arts mashup that he does that is like his thing, and he's got enough power that he's never had to change it.
Sure, yeah.
Let's see. Odds on this fight. Meerschaert is coming in at -211 to 230 or to minus 2. Oh, no, that's right. I'm doing the other spread. He opened at minus 195, has gone out to minus 228. Gigliotti, the underdog, opening at plus 155, now to plus 184. The other thing I would say, though, that interests me here is that I don't think either of these guys is a true middleweight. And that might play well for Joe Gigliotti here. That like Meerschaert has never really, like, at least in his official recorded weigh-ins that I could find, has weighed in at like 183, and even early in his career as low as 180. So
he's not a huge dude too. You kind of get the feeling like he doesn't really cut weight.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's not huge. He doesn't look like a great athlete. He may just not be athletic enough to compete at this kind of level.
Could be.
And so if that's going to be a problem for him, Gigliotti could absolutely just run him over out of the gate. Like, there's a big chance of that.
Yeah.
I like the odds are just a little spread for me for guys that are not like that I'm not very high on either of them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to more see them in the plus minus 150 range.
Definitely. It should just be just call it an even fight. Just
it's an even fight. Yeah.
Don't bet on it.
That brings us to a welterweight bout, Randy Brown versus Brian Camozzi. And this is me, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting one because both guys are going to get absolutely the fight they want. In fact, they are almost the same fighter, except that Randy Brown is, I would say, the better athlete and the more natural athlete. And Brian Camozzi is the more consistent worker and more consistent round winner stylistically. But otherwise, they have the same tendency for, like, they both are very good clinch fighters. They're both inconsistent range fighters. Camozzi being a pressuring range fighter, Brown being a countering range fighter. And they both have a better than you'd expect scrambling grappling game that with some bad wrestling. So, question is, do you trust Randy Brown's combination of low output counter range striking and good athleticism over Camozzi's closing ability and pressure ability? Or do you trust Brown to be that much better than Camozzi in the clinch, where Camozzi's also pretty good? That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Like, I want to pick Brown because I like his athleticism and I like that he's trickier than he seems, than people expect him to be. Like, people are like, oh, he's a big athletic striker, whatever, and then he actually, he gets submissions and he has a good back take game and things like that. But Camozzi is definitely Camozzi seems like he's a much more grounded fighter with like how he should fight, like how to win a fight and how to go in and fight to win on the card and to get a knockout and to really go after somebody.
Mm-hmm.
He still has his brother's exact same awkward ass range striking though. That's just like like, it looks good for a punch. He'll throw a punch, and you're like, oh, he's a good range striker. And then he'll throw 2 punches, and you're like, did that 5'6" dude just, like, clock him?
He's like a really slow Amir Khan. Just gets out of position, but he doesn't have that crazy speed to save him.
Yeah, like, I watched his fight with Kenneth Glenn, who is, let's see, 6'. Weight. Whenever Camozzi would throw like more than one strike at range, even throw a 1-2, Glenn would clock him.
Yeah.
End up with his chin up and like his both hands out, and it's just like, this is not good. So I'm picking Brown here I don't think Camozzi can be busy enough at range Brown without getting hurt, and I don't think he can dominate Brown in the clinch, where Brown has shown to be a very good controlling, powerful clinch fighter with good power strikes there, And then neither of these guys really has the ability to take over on the ground. So that's really all I'm thinking about.
Yeah. It's tough, man. I really think that Randy Brown is not actually that good of a striker. And that's the question mark for me in this matchup, is that he seems like he should be such an effective striker because of his
I don't think
build.
either of these guys are that good of a striker.
No, but I kind of think Brian Camozzi's better. I think at least he's got a better process behind his striking. Randy Brown is kind of just guessing to try and surprise you with some random thing. And it's like you're a guy of his size. It's the same frustrating thing I always see with Neil Magny. You know, you got this reach advantage. Why are you not jabbing more? Why are you not just constantly keeping your jab in this other guy's chest, touching him? You can literally touch him just to see how far away he is without any threat of being hit for it. That's how advanced your range is, that you can just touch him without much fear. And he doesn't do it. A lot of lead rights from Randy Brown, a lot of weird kicks. And then questionable fight IQ, I would say. Obviously a great athlete, very dangerous everywhere, surprisingly effective, as you said, Zane, in places where you really don't expect him to be. But that doesn't really make it the fact that he ended up submitting Eric Montano doesn't really make it great that he just continually grappled with Eric Montano while being out grappled for a lot of that fight. I mean, I think he was on his way to losing a decision when he got that submission. And everybody who watches this show knows how I feel about the Montanos. I don't consider barely beating a Montano brother to be a great accolade. So I kind of think Brian Camozzi will get the win. I think volume and pressure are going to be the thing. I think having something close to Randy Brown's reach while being able to throw more, and even if he's getting out of position, he's still throwing more than one punch at a time, and he's throwing his single punches more frequently. And I think that's going to be the saving grace for him here. I think he's just going to outpoint Brown on the feet. But, you know, like Randy Brown might just wrap up a guillotine or something weird. He's a very solid fighter physically, and it allows him to make things work when lesser fighters would not be able to pull it out. But
I think that's just going to end up in the clinch a lot. It's going to end up with Camozzi. It's going to come down to how much damage can Camozzi do walking into the clinch, I feel like.
Yeah,
will he avoid getting countered, and will he avoid getting, having hard shots land on him while he throws hard shots getting into the clinch? Because Brown, like, both guys are going to do work inside, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know that either of them is going to have a decided advantage there. And then they're both guard grapplers off their back. So I don't know that, I don't trust either of them to hold any kind of great grappling game,
Yeah.
Watch two guys try to pull guard on each other.
I just want to see a fight where two guys square off and then instantly flop to their backs.
I want to see them run and jump on each other in midair and fall to the ground.
Just end up in sort of an awkward scissor position, just crotches smashing together. That's what I want from this fight. That would be my dream.
All right. Camozzi is the underdog. He opened at plus 135. He's now up to plus 144. Randy Brown, the favorite, opening at minus 175, now minus 172. Not a lot of movement there. I would frankly say that, the odds are close and they should be close. The only thing I might say is fight doesn't go to decision is even minus 125. So that's not even really a bet. I don't know. There's nothing there. Honestly.
Under 2.5 rounds is plus 115.
Under 2.5. Yeah, that might be the bet. Plus 115 on under 2.5 rounds.
Maybe.
Because both these guys.
It's a hard fight to call.
Both of them tend to finish.
Yeah, but both are also very tough. That's the thing. Both are durable and resourceful. It's a hard fight to call, man. It's a weird one.
It is. It's a weird fight. Should be a fun one, though.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a bout between Justine Kish and Ashley Yoder.
Yeah, well, Justine Kish, I think a lot of people felt got kind of lucky winning her UFC debut over Nina Ansaroff. She looked better than she did in that fight in her previous bouts, that is for sure. And had a long layoff, came back. And so maybe there's some reason to believe that there was some ring rust involved there. It had been, I think, 2 years almost exactly since her last
Kish's
fight.
entire career has been ring rust. She fought once in 2010, twice in 2013, once in 2014, and once in 2016.
Yeah, now twice in 2016. We're on a roll.
Twice.
Although
a year apart.
10 months apart. Yeah. So it's hard to say where Kish is going to be. And if she were more reliable, I'd say she might be a not a too difficult pick over Ashley Yoder. You know, if she were reliably getting herself into the clinch, controlling her opponent against the fence, those are things that Yoder is susceptible to. She can be taken down. She can be pressured and controlled. And she's really at her best if you give her space, if you give her time and space to work in a single phase, whether that is on her back or fighting from distance. You know, you give her time to find her setups and she's pretty good. You pressure her, you make her react all the time. You can dictate where the fight goes. But because Kish didn't look that great against Ansarov, it kind of feels like Yoder's got an edge here. She's the more accurate striker. She does well from range. And she's really, really active off of her back. Really solid submission game. And so I don't know. It's a really tough fight to call either way. I'm just going to go with Yoder. I think because I liked what I saw in her last win more than what I saw from Kish. But again, like if I hadn't seen that last fight from Kish, I think I would confidently pick her. If I wasn't worried about what Kish, you know what? I am going to pick Justine Kish. Actually, I just think she has a stylistic edge, and I just hope that she shows up better than she did last time.
Yeah, I'm not at all convinced by Ashley Yoder, frankly. Like her win over Amber Brown.
Yeah.
Because, like, threw herself at Amber Brown and then, like, played the guard game for that fight.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that you only get away with in women's MMA.
Yeah, like
and
she's had
not
three.
As much as strawweight.
Every one of Yoder's finishes are armbar submissions.
Yeah,
and her only decision is a split.
Did I'm seeing on Wikipedia, Zane, that this is a catch weight. Did Kish have trouble making weight?
I don't know because it's been going on while we've been talking.
I think maybe so that may also be another wrinkle to consider if somebody had trouble making weight.
Yeah. But Kish, like seeing her come out, she just tried to blitz Nina Ansaroff. And it turns out that Nina Ansaroff, who's a pretty dynamic athlete, she's never had, to quote ourselves, she's never had great process. She was very early in her career. She was very easily to, like, if you pressured her, she would immediately go to like a spinning back fist as her default and just get like pushed against the cage. And she needed all this space to be dynamic. But the moment she closed down, she would just kind of like wing stuff and just get really sloppy. And it seems like Ansaroff fixed a ton of that in that Kish fight. And when Kish came charging at her, Ansaroff just stood her ground and boxed the shit out of her.
Yeah.
That said, like, if Kish comes out and charges Ashley Yoder, I don't expect Ashley Yoder to have an answer. Like, I don't expect her to have any of the answer that Kish did. And I just don't. I hate to see a fighter who pulls guard and relies on that to generate significant round offense as somebody who I would trust to win against a good athlete who's going to come out aggressive. Yeah. So I'm picking Kish, but all of her layoffs are a concern. I'm also just looking at Yoder's last fight too. Like, I don't know how great she didn't look like she was in great fight shape. So I kind of wonder too about like her conditioning and her camp and stuff like that. I wouldn't. Maybe you can find it on Twitter to see, like, look up Kish and the latest results can be who missed weight. But
yeah, I'm trying to find out right now.
Anyway, I'm picking Kish in that. Odds on that fight, Kish is a large favorite or reasonably large favorite, minus 190 now to minus 234. Yoder at plus 150 now to plus 190. I do not think that Kish should be that decided a favorite. She did not look great in her last bout. She has not proven much, and she has not fought often. And also, as we've seen, one of the core, like, great prospect wins of Justine Kish's career was Randa Marcos, and that is slowly looking less and less meaningful as Marcos goes forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think really Marcos is more a fighter who's been figured out than one who was never good. I think she's kind of stagnated. I still consider a win over Marcos to be pretty solid.
Yeah, but I mean, you also then look at Marcos's record, and her best win is Aisling Daly. Like, that's been the high point of Marcos's career.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's just Kish does not necessarily deserve to be floating around at minus 240 when she probably should have lost her last fight and could easily get herself into a sloppy battle of wills that she loses. You know, she could throw herself into an armbar for, you know, Yoder's record. I would not trust Kish to be that big a favorite. See, Yoder by submission. What's the odds there? Not that I would pick her, but Yoder inside the distance is plus 422. So if you think that you want to bet there, I wouldn't, but
I'm watching the video right now, by the way. Kish had to weigh in naked behind the towel and looks like she was the one who missed weight.
So Kish missed weight. So it's worth something, but I don't tend to take a lot from that. Oftentimes people use it like, oh, they missed weight, they're going to look bad.
People
and then
think
they get into the fight. And
people are like, I'm changing my bet, and then the person just looks fine.
Yeah, like I remember people being like, Alex Oliveira is going to have like, you know, this terrible disadvantage against what's his name?
It ended up being an advantage against Will Brooks.
Yeah, against Will Brooks. And it's like, he's just going to be huge. He didn't look like he worked that hard on that.
Fine.
He looked fine. Yeah, you never know how much a bad weight cut is or isn't going to affect somebody, honestly.
Yeah.
That brings us to the main card, a light heavyweight bout. Gian Villante versus Saparbek Safarov. Gian Villante should crush Saparbek Safarov, and the only reason that he won't is he might not is because he's Gian Villante. That is literally the only reason. Safarov, I don't know why he's here. I don't like this is just the UFC seeing a good record and on a Russian and being like, we need light heavyweights, fuck it. Go in there. But Gerald Harris gave Safarov a hell of a fight. And it, you know, no. This is a Safarov is not this level, and if he beats Gian Villante, it's only going to be Gian Villante is so susceptible to weird losses.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. I think you're spot on. If Gian Villante screws up in classic Gian Villante fashion, he could lose, but he has more power. He's tough. He's a pretty good technical striker. As long as he doesn't just get wild and bizarre the way he has with his technique in past fights, then he, even if he does, he should still be okay.
Yeah, the problem for Villante is always that, like, he'll be beating somebody and he'll be doing well, and he'll just get so comfortable, I think, that he just kind of tunes out.
Yeah.
Like, he's just like, okay, well, everything's working. Good. I'm in a rhythm. Don't need to think about it. Just flowing. Yeah. And then just gets knocked out.
Yeah.
Because he just wasn't even paying attention to what his opponent is doing anymore.
Right. Tom Lawler fight. Perfect example of that.
You know, or the Chad Griggs fight. Like, although that was in 2.5 minutes. So, but still, like, he can take weird losses at any time because of that.
I mean, he's in good company, though. Both he and Fedor Emelianenko have lost to Fabio Maldonado. So he's officially on the same tier as Fedor now.
But, yeah, Saparbek Safarov is he's not a good wrestler or grappler for a Russian. He is a brawler, and he's actually a cautious brawler. So that is like the worst kind of brawler to be. A brawler that doesn't really want to pull the trigger unless he absolutely has to. And then he just goes nuts and chases people around the cage, swinging at them.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Safarov is doing there. Villante is the favorite opening at minus 215, now closing to minus 180. Safarov opening at plus 165, now down to plus 152. That is pretty ridiculous, honestly. Let's see. I realize it's John Villante, so I'm not going to be like, yes, confidently place a bet on John Villante winning a John Villante fight. Not a good idea. But actually, I want Tapology. I forgot. I'm opening Sherdog. They're always so fucking these days. I hate saying that because I like Sherdog as an organization, but
yeah,
it's their usability for their Fight Finder is tanked. You know, Rodney Wallace is 25 and 10. Giga Kukalashvili 1-1. Vladas Pasavicius 33 and 30. Like, these are the dudes that Saparbek Safarov is beating.
Yeah.
And it took 2 rounds of a full round of getting out grappled by Rodney Wallace, firmly out grappled by Rodney Wallace for Safarov to win that fight. And it's not good. You know, not that he's fighting in Ukraine on the Ukrainian circuit, and that is not a good circuit. Like, that is legitimately not high-level fighters. So Safarov is tough, and he's going to brawl when he has to, but he's probably just going to either patiently get out kickboxed or hopefully just out wrestled and out grappled really firmly. Let's see if there's... Yeah, I wouldn't take any prop bets or anything. I mean, Villante, if you want to bet on it, Villante's worth a straight bet, maybe just at, I would say over 1.5 rounds, actually, at plus 100, maybe. I don't know.
It's a
weird trash fight. Don't bet on John Villante. It's like a heavyweight bout, honestly. It is.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, next up, another light heavyweight fight. Corey Anderson, Sean O'Connell. Go ahead.
Corey Anderson has run into some roadblocks lately. The Shogun fight, one that I think most people thought he won, but was tougher than expected for him. Likewise for the Tom Lawler fight. I don't think that's really any kind of strong statement on what any suggestion that this is Corey Anderson's ceiling. No. I just think maybe he's going to be a lot like one of Mark Henry's other fighters, Edson Barboza. He's going to have these problems as he comes into his physical prime. He's going to learn that maybe he doesn't have a great chin. Maybe he's not a huge power puncher, but that if he can be a really smart technical fighter, he can still win. You know, he's got great stamina. He's got great hand speed. He recovers well, and he is learning to throw a lot of volume and move in between effective attacks. And I think if he continues to do that, he still has a future as a potential, title contender, if not a champion someday down the line. He's still only 27 years old. He's basically a baby for a light heavyweight. And he's getting some really valuable experience. Even if all these fights aren't going his way, he's getting valuable experience. John Villante, Jan Blachowicz, Fabio Maldonado, Tom Lawler, Shogun Rua, those are all good people to have fought, a wide range of styles to kind of figure out what your strengths and weaknesses really are. Now he goes in there against Sean O'Connell, pretty easy guy to prepare for. You know exactly what he's going to do. Should be a chance for Corey Anderson to prove that he and Mark Henry can come up with and execute to a game plan. Sean O'Connell, that does not make him an easy opponent. He's very aggressive. He's pretty powerful. He takes a great shot, and he just keeps on coming. And so you are going to have to fight a pretty perfect fight to keep your chances of beating him above about 80%. But I do still think those are about the chances that Corey Anderson wins here. I think especially if he gets his wrestling going, he's going to have an easier time with Sean O'Connell. Corey Anderson, a very solid wrestler, great top control, and top position jiu-jitsu, very much like Frankie Edgar when he's on top. Got the half guard game, good ground and pound, smothers you, but tires you out and beats you up a little bit at the same time. So, Corey Anderson by decision is my pick.
Yeah, Sean O'Connell, I mean, the thing with Sean O'Connell is he has gotten a little better over his time in the UFC. He's become a more consistent brawler, I would say.
Sure.
His punching technique, most importantly, has improved.
Yeah.
Even if his defense and other things have not.
Yeah.
But the wall he's running into is honestly just an athleticism wall.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, you look at the guys he's beat in the UFC, Anthony Perosh, Matt Van Buren, about as underwhelming athletically as
Yes.
anybody in the light heavyweight gets.
Sean O'Connell is the dividing line. Like, you're unathletic, you lose to Sean O'Connell. You look like a fairly elite athlete. You beat Sean O'Connell. That's it.
Yeah. Ryan Jimmo knocked him out. John Villante beat him. Ilir Latifi knocked him out. Steve Bossy beat him. That Bossy fight was awesome.
Amazing. Yeah. But all really good athletes.
Yeah. And Corey Anderson is a good athlete, and he's not going to fight that Steve Bossy fight.
Yeah. I mean, if he does, then he will be kicking himself the day after.
Yeah. I think Anderson can grind O'Connell pretty well and make this fight hard on O'Connell and push him around and get a good, tough 3-round win.
Yeah, and I think there may be some opportunity for him here. He may want to come out and try to outbox a pressure fighter a bit, work on his footwork and his striking. But I think the best way for Corey Anderson to approach this fight is to always keep in his mind, all I have to do is take him down. If things get hard, I take him down, and that way he can get in some work and still get a reliable path to victory.
Yeah, and I mean, O'Connell still leads with his face and throws both hands at the same time.
There's an opportunity there for a guy who's working on his pivots and his counter punches to get a little practice in.
Yeah, that's one of the big reasons O'Connell's been knocked out is he's got no fear about just throwing his face at you to try and come after.
To his credit, no one seems to have instilled that fear in him, despite the several times now he has been punished for it.
Yep. O'Connell is the underdog, opening at plus 325 down to plus 310. Anderson, the favorite, opening at minus 475, now at minus 397. Those odds are a little wide, but I would not bet on anything at all.
What's Anderson by decision?
Anderson by decision, that may be, let's see. Corey Anderson wins by...
Plus 160. That's not terrible.
Plus 135, yeah. I have it. Plus 135.
I might not have updated. That's not terrible, though.
Yeah, that's actually... That might be the way to go. O'Connell is not the most durable fighter in the world, but Anderson has not shown himself to be a great knockout artist to date.
I still have Anderson by decision at 160. I refreshed my page, so
maybe it's me that needs to refresh.
But that is not a bad bet.
Yeah, that might be your bet. Is Corey Anderson by decision? Of course, it's light heavyweight, and yeah, you're right. I have it at plus 160 now.
He could also finish Sean O'Connell and make that a terrible bet. So
yeah, so don't in general, you've got an aggressive guy with some minor durability problems and a lack of technical skill against a fairly technical, raw fighter trying to improve his overall game and without a lot of finishing skill.
With also durability problems of his own.
With also durability problems, it does not make for a lot of smart bets. With really wide odds, like I wouldn't bet on O'Connell, No. All right. That brings us to heavyweight bout, Francis Ngannou, Anthony Hamilton. Anthony Hamilton tends to only beat people that are smaller and less athletic than him. That's not Francis Ngannou. So Francis Ngannou should sleep Anthony Hamilton. That's about it.
Yeah, I can't be quite so blasé about it because Anthony Hamilton... I have tough.
Every Anthony Hamilton fight wrong. So
right, he's always better or worse than you expect him to be. Like he uses really simple tactics to surprise and overwhelm fighters that he can physically overpower. The freight train is an apt nickname because he does just kind of run through people when he wants to take them down, and he's very physical, pretty durable. Seems to have a good gas tank despite putting in a lot of energy in a lot of early rounds. And he is big and strong, and just being big and strong and being committed to takedowns might give him a path to take Ngannou down. Ngannou's still not a great grappler. Never seen anything from him off of his back that inspires confidence in me. But what I have seen from Ngannou is a really quick development of an anti-wrestling game where he's scrambling back to his feet really quickly. He's not trying to play a ground game, and he's maintaining distance better to prevent the takedown from being initiated. I think Anthony Hamilton will probably take Francis Ngannou down early in this fight. I think that may be the last moment of success he has. I think he'll get him down, and Ngannou will pop back up, and then it'll slowly, or maybe not that slowly, become a Francis Ngannou fight. But I can't count Anthony Hamilton out entirely, because what if he does get Ngannou down and just lays on him and hits him in the ribs? Like Anthony Hamilton is such a hard fighter to predict. He's weird, man. So
I finally, I think, hit on the, like, if he's bigger than the dude, that's when he really has a good shot.
Yeah. That's when he wins. Yeah. And it may even be a psychological thing too. Like I know from my experience, when I spar someone smaller than me, I feel better. I feel more confident.
You're like, this dude can't take me. I can do whatever I want.
And I can spar someone worse than me who's bigger than me, but it really changes the way you feel,
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a lot of, like, we see that a lot with fighters too. Like, they'll step in the cage, somebody that has better skill than somebody, they'll step into the cage with the dude that's just huge and powerful. And suddenly it's just like that fighter looks more cautious than they've ever looked in their entire career.
Yeah. I mean, Kelvin Gastelum, never a man known for caution, totally failed to pull the trigger for 3 rounds against Neil Magny. And Kelvin Gastelum's a better striker than Neil Magny.
Yeah.
So it happens.
It does. And Ngannou is never going to have that problem. He's never going to face somebody bigger than him.
He is an Adonis. He is an impressive physical specimen.
So I got to pick Ngannou there, and it's a heavyweight fight, so rarely do you want to be that confident. Yeah. To that point, however, Francis Ngannou is the favorite, opening at -600, moving to -526.
It's too wide, people.
It is. It's too wide at heavyweight. Anthony Hamilton opening at +400 down to +393.
I love Francis Ngannou. I'm excited for a serious heavyweight prospect. I want to see him develop. I will laugh so hard if Anthony Hamilton knocks him out in the first round.
I know.
I will lose my shit if that happens.
Much more reasonable heavyweight odds incoming.
Yes.
Let's see. Anthony Hamilton by... Well, I wouldn't even say necessarily needs to be a KO. Hamilton could just take him for a decision. Ngannou's tough as shit.
Yeah.
But so Anthony Hamilton is probably just worth the straight underdog bet at +431. If you just, I say don't bet on heavyweight fights.
I'm not betting on this one.
Yeah, don't bet on them. But those are absurdly wide odds.
Yeah.
For heavyweight, for a guy in Francis Ngannou whose best win to date is Curtis Blades.
Right. Yeah.
That is the high point of his career. That brings us to the main event: Derrick Lewis versus Shamil Abdurakhimov. And take it away.
I have not even thought about this fight enough to pick a winner here, because I don't think this is. Derrick Lewis is clearly the favored fighter. He's the one they want to win. But Derrick Lewis is a tightrope fighter, man. You never watch a Derrick Lewis fight and feel like this guy is going to run through X opponent after having seen this. It's always something bad happens to him at some point. He gets taken down and controlled and looks like he doesn't have any idea how to stop a takedown. Like, that still happens to this day. Derrick Lewis has 21 fights in his resume. He's been fighting for almost coming up on 7 years soon. And he still looks like he has no idea how to wrestle.
Yeah.
Which is a little worrying,
Well, the weird part, but the reasoning, part of the reasoning behind that, the ridiculous, stupid reasoning behind that, is that he legit fucking bench pressed Roy Nelson off of him in their fight. Yeah,
he doesn't need, he is such a huge, strong, powerful fighter that he's still winning despite not knowing how to wrestle, or despite not having great takedown defense or even a great chin. But at some point, somebody is going to have enough level of technique. I mean, it has happened already. He got outstruck and knocked out by Sean Jordan.
I know. He doesn't have a great chin. He
doesn't. He's a terrifying glass cannon, because he's very fragile, but I think he has the heaviest hands in the division. His power is huge. More one-punch knockouts than we've really seen from anybody else active today. So Derrick Lewis, dangerous but vulnerable, and that's the feeling you get in every single one of his fights. Shamil Abdurakhimov, you don't really get strong feelings about in any way. except just that he's like vaguely technical. He's like the heavyweight Chad Laprise. You know what I mean? Like, which is good and bad. Chad Laprise is a very technical fighter. Abdurakhimov, solid footwork, knows how to feint, good timing on his counter punches, good variety.
He got submitted by Tony Lopez, though.
Right, good variety of attacks, but then kind of just average as far as athleticism and power is involved. Doesn't have like this crazy will to win. So fragile, vulnerable in his own way, but style. We have a guy whose style is like not consistent but really dangerous against a guy whose style is consistent but not dangerous, both of whom could lose at any moment, especially so because it's a heavyweight fight. So I don't know. I could really, really see Abdurakhimov beating Derrick Lewis down the stretch. I could absolutely see him outpointing Lewis, denying him opportunities, surviving one or two scares, and just racking up more volume. But I can so totally see Derrick Lewis just destroying Abdurakhimov in one round. Go ahead,
pick.
I'm going to go with Derrick Lewis.
All right. Two things. First of all, do you know what the style is listed as on Derrick Lewis's Wikipedia page? I have to think.
Style, in quotes, with apostrophes, swangin' and bangin'.
You know that he said that at some point, too. That's not making that up.
He probably edited that shit himself. Oh, swangin' and bangin'. That is his official style. I hope Bruce Buffer announces him as that. I've never caught it.
No, I've never caught it either, but it really needs to be listed.
It perfectly encapsulates Derrick Lewis as a person and as a fighter. Is swangin' and bangin'. That's his thing.
So that's the first thing. The second thing, Shamil Abdurakhimov took Walt Harris to a split decision.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever were to get a super toned down, like, cut rate version of Derrick Lewis, it's Walt Harris.
Here's the thing, though. You know what I mean? Derrick Lewis
is a cut rate version of Derrick Lewis.
Derrick Lewis, he's not that good. You know what I mean? Like, all the things he knows how to do, it's a pretty small selection. He's just so dangerous.
But, like, he hit Roy Nelson with shots that, like, I do not know how they did not break Roy Nelson.
No, yeah. There were shots that definitely would have put Abdurakhimov out.
There was a flying knee in there at one point. I remember that you could just hear this, like, meat thwack as he hit Roy Nelson in the gut with it. And it's just like, how does that not just crumple anyone? Like, he is absolutely terrifying beyond belief. And the thing is that his output may not maintain, but the terrifyingness does.
Yeah, and the big development for Derrick Lewis has not been in any technical realm, really, but it's been in him, like, accepting the fact that he can lose rounds and still win the fight.
Yeah,
and
he's become patient.
Right. He gets taken down, and you can see him. He goes Anderson Silva a little bit. He gets a little zen. He closes his eyes. He takes a few deep breaths. He gathers himself, and then he waits for one moment when he can just bench press a 260-pound man off of him and get back to his feet. But he doesn't go crazy. You know, he's calm.
No. Because that was a big problem for him early, is that he would get taken down and he'd just start, like, flailing and
he would gas immediately.
Gas.
Yeah, and now he's dangerous for 3 rounds.
And I don't see Abdurakhimov, like, you can't be a heavyweight point fighter and climb the ranks. Not really. Not unless you're, like, maybe, and I'm not sure about this, but what's it? Rashid Magomedov or
Ruslan
Magomedov, maybe when you're like 6'7",
and he's also a guy like you. Like, I have a lot of questions about how good he actually is.
Yeah, but you have to be powerful. Like, at some point, you have to be able to knock dudes out. And Abdurakhimov, you know, even in that Walt Harris fight, when he's doing well and he's outpointing Harris and hurting him, like, Harris was still able to land shots and scare Abdurakhimov off and, like, hold his own in there. And Derrick Lewis hits way harder and does so way more consistently and is way better timing and is much more dangerous with his application.
I did enjoy watching Abdurakhimov outclass Anthony Hamilton, though. That was fun.
Yeah, it is. So you got to pick Derrick Lewis, and Derrick Lewis opened at -190. He's now up to -205. Abdurakhimov opened at +150. He's up to +169. I am honestly a little more surprised that the Lewis Abdurakhimov line isn't more like the Ngannou Hamilton line.
It probably has something to do with Lewis's last fight, with a lot of people thinking that he should have lost to Nelson.
I guess, but my takeaway from that last fight was you have to be as durable as Roy fucking Nelson to survive that.
Yeah, what is Lewis by knockout?
Lewis by
-135. Still favorite odds.
Wins by TKO KO -135, and that's probably that's not a bad bet. Maybe
that's probably the bet to make.
Yeah,
you know? If you're gonna pick Derrick Lewis, you may as well take the better odds offered by the knockout line, because like he has. Let's see, how many guys has he beaten without knocking him out? One guy he submitted, and then Roy Nelson he couldn't finish. Everybody else he's beaten, he's knocked him out.
Yep.
So if you're going to bet on Lewis, you may as well bet on him by knockout.
Yeah, and I seriously doubt that Shamil Abdurakhimov, even having never lost by knockout, having lost by knockout once, I seriously doubt Shamil Abdurakhimov can stand up to Derrick Lewis for 3 rounds.
Yeah, me too.
All right, that's it. Any last calls before we shut this thing down?
Nope, I'm done. You guys can look through the episode if you want to see those betting advices a second time.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at These Anytime. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. That's where we have all our articles, all that. Connor's with his breakdowns, all that good shit. And we will have more shows coming at you. I'll be back for the 6th round. We will be back next week to talk shit, I don't even know what's coming up next week. Next week is UFC on Fox, Van Zant versus Watterson. We'll be back for that. Care don't care if I did it. Vivisection, all that good stuff. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like. That's a thumbs up thing. That helps us a bunch. And subscribe to MMANation.com, DOTCOM. That's our YouTube channel. And that's where you get all our shows. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.